الحمد لله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين يا رب لك الحمد حتى ترضى اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Welcome everybody to this semester's khutbah training workshop. Just with the raise of hands, how many people here the workshop we did last term? Okay, just 4 people. Okay, alhamdulillah. Theoretical aspects of first and of Jumu'ah, and then Allah Ta'ala, I believe the program suggests that we'll do a break for Asr, and post that break then we'll get into some practical workshop style things that hopefully everybody's ability to number one, be more outspoken in front of people, so public speaking skills, and more importantly, get the mindset for Jumu'ah. This is, to be honest, most of this is relevant for sisters as well, because it's about public speaking, right? Obviously, not asking sisters to give long quiz, but sisters are in many capacities in public speaking, in whatever capacity they're speaking in. So a lot of these things are so today, inshallah, we're going to be a quick for the 3-4 of us who visited last semester and you've gone through this. A quick overview of the theoretical components of Jumu'ah. What happened is that a few years ago, I was asked to conduct this seminar at York University. And when I was putting things together, I realized that the books on the books of Jumu'ah were really good, but they were legalistic. Meaning they were telling us, how do you get a valid Jumu'ah underway? They weren't giving guidelines as how do you give a good khutbah? Or what is a good khutbah? On the other hand, there were a lot of really good books on public speaking. There were a lot of seminars on public speaking that were really, really good, but they weren't integrated into the Jumu'ah circuit amongst the scholars. So what I did was I created this course called the Prophetic Pulpit. And the Prophetic Pulpit is supposed to be a 3-day long course which goes over about 42 maxims or principles on how do you give a good Jumu'ah khutbah. Of course, this is very difficult to do on campus, 3 days straight, 4 to 6 hours each day. So the course got redacted and the 2025 version can be done within a couple of hours. 4 to 6 hours each day. We could go through the whole thing in a couple of hours, inshallah ta'ala, and that's what we intend to do. So we're going to go over the science and art of effective khutbah delivery. At any point, if there are questions or concerns, please raise your hand. This is not meant to be a traditional lecture in the sense that there might be scenarios you want to discuss. There might be things that are very, from a practical standpoint, that you want to talk about, and get into those as well. Okay? All right, let's get started. So, what is the object of the seminar? The first thing is that if you are wanting to give a Jumu'ah khutbah or a public speech or a da'wah, then you are in the position of service. This is the first very important thing to consider. We don't get in front of people as an imam, as a murabbi, as someone who is leading a community for the sake of our own agency. Not doing this for points, for jah, for status, stature. No, it's from the above service. What that means is that the most important person in the room when a khateeb is given from a khateeb's lens is not the khateeb. It's everybody else. The khateeb is just providing a service. It's the people sitting down to serve. And in any scenario, when you have a person served, who is more aham? Who is more important, the person serving or the person being served? In any scenario, the person being served is more important, which means everyone sitting down and listening to khutbah is actually aham. It's more important than the khateeb. Right? So it's to know that when you get into this field, or when you get into this craft, this is an issue of service. It is not about what Islam can do for me, but rather what I can do for Islam. And in this case, when you're being called to go in front of people and deliver a message. Now, it so happens that could be people here who have already given khutbah. So raise your hand if you've given a khutbah before. Okay, keep your hands raised if you've given at least. Okay, keep your hand raised if you've given at least 50 khutbahs. Okay, okay, good, very good. Hands down. Okay, raise your hand if you haven't ever given a khutbah before. Okay, great. Right, excellent. Alhamdulillah. It so happens that, when we'll talk about this inshallah in more details, giving a khutbah is a calling. It's an ask, right? And people get better the more they do it. Just like in other skills. You've given many khutbahs, you'll realize. For those of us who gave many khutbahs, you remember your first khutbah? Do you remember how big of a disaster it was? Yes? It was like that for all of us. All right? And eventually, through practice and through further practice, so the first thing is from the branches of service. Second, this is the need of the hour. How many people here are you're aware of a particular musalla in your neighborhood or a masjid, and there's a crisis of finding the right person for that region? Are you aware of this? Do you guys know if you go to any
There's a blue tech box that has cable HDMI
on Wednesday and around Thursday, yeah, and the reason is because some musalla somewhere is looking for an imam and we can't find one, right? And the management doesn't want to just get anyone up there. Or they're busy, because a lot of the people who can actually do this are at work and they're doing their jumu'ah either at work or somewhere close to work where there's a masjid or a musalla. So there is a crisis of finding good khateebs in our city. I'm not exaggerating. You could go ask any local imam, they will do the same thing. There's a crisis on the prophetic pulpit. Number one, of boredom. A lot of the khutbahs are very engaging. Number two, of provocation. Some khutbahs is literally an uncle getting angry at you, right? And hurling interesting things about why the society is so messed up. It's like their personal rant session, right? They feel lighter at the end of the khutbah. It's like, I got this off my chest, right? Like a therapy session for the imam. I just go rant about how horrible it was doing, and how amazing they should have been doing, and how great things were back home, right? And finally, it is incompetence, right? It's people who haven't trained to be thieves, who haven't gone through a system of developing their own so that they represent the religion of the Prophet some appropriately from the prophetic pulpit, right? And it basically comes down to we couldn't find someone else, therefore this brother is giving the khutbah, right? And this is why for MSAs this is really important. Why? Because an MSA is like a mini ummah. It's like a mini city. The university is a mini city, right? And in the city, there's actually, if you take the hukum of fard kifaya, then a city has fard kifaya laws. There has to be people on campus who are trained to give a khutbah. Kifayatan, like this is on everybody. Like they have to produce some people, otherwise everyone else is in trouble. Right? Just like, for example, to know how to do ghusl of the dead body is fard kifaya. Which means someone in the community has to know that. Because if they don't know that, then someone is buried without being purified. So someone in the community has to learn it. And if they learn it, everyone else is sin-free. But if nobody learns it, then the entire community is sinful. Do you understand how that works? Okay, Jummah khutbah is the same thing. Some people in the community must learn how to give good Jummah khutbahs. They must learn how to do this right. Otherwise, the whole community is in trouble. So how does this work? The third component of it, after service, after recognizing there's a problem. By the way, I put there, if there is a problem on the prophet pulpit, what's the solution? It's you, right? And that's the niyyah that we should have. And if you ever give Jummah khutbah, and I mean this, by the way, this is not rhetoric. I'm not saying this to like for social media purposes. I say it because I mean it. Every single person who's assigned to do the Jummah that week should have the intention that there's no one around the world who will be giving a better Jummah today for this Friday than me. Not out of arrogance, but this is what our religion demands. This is the itqan that our religion demands. This is the ihsan. This is the right of that mimbar that we stand on. This, I'm going to repeat this many times, by the way, so that it goes through your head. If the Prophet ﷺ was on campus, at Waterloo campus, on Friday, right? Do you think, let's say for that Friday, Uzair is assigned to give the schedule, right? The first khutbah at the SL, right? Schedule what he's supposed to give. It so happens the Prophet ﷺ is here on campus. It's 1:30. You think Uzair is going to give this khutbah? What do you think? But he's on schedule. Right. Oh. You think he's going to give, or is the Prophet going to give the khutbah? What does that prove? The official Khateeb of Jumu'ah at every masjid around the world is always the Prophet. But he's not here to lead a replacement. So like a substitute teacher. A substitute teacher. Which means we should understand whose pulpit is this. Was that Uzair's pulpit now? Should he get onto the pulpit thinking this is my pulpit? No, he's a substitute teacher. Should the substitute teacher come to class thinking this is my classroom? No, it's the official teacher's classroom, not there. That's not happening. Right, so none of us are actually the thieves. We're the replacement. The actual theme of every single Jumu'ah around every masjid in campus and salah is the Prophet's son. He is not here, and therefore the miskin guy has to replace him. Okay? And he's responsible. This person is responsible for prophetic duties. It's what it's called a prophetic pulpit. It's not ours. And that comes with prophetic rights. And that's the presentation today. Learning how is it that we maintain prophetic rights when you get on his mimbar. It's his mimbar. This is why Abu Bakr is a great Khalifa. While Allah was alive, did Abu Bakr give even one Jumu'ah khutbah? Do you think so? Did he give a single? What did he write people know? Right? Like Jabir did these people give khutbahs while Allah was alive? No. It's not their maqam. Right? Okay, finally, last one. Mastery. The last thing is not religious per se. That's giving a Jumu'ah is public speaking. So you could have great someone with expertise in fiqh and tafsir and ijtihad and iftah and tariq and balagha in the Arabic language. Oh, great guy in terms of written great books. Does that give him the maqam of being a great khatib, a great orator, public? No, completely different. You can have someone in MSA who's taken classes, very knowledgeable, doing their religions. Does that automatically make them a great khatib? No, because the skill set is slightly different. And it's not an issue of whether someone needs the knowledge or not. But there's another skill that you need along with knowledge. There's a skill as well. And what is that skill? That skill is the ability to speak publicly. And that skill is developed. Some people have a propensity to be really good at it. But it still has to be harnessed. It has to be refined. It has to be developed. And this is why all of you guys who said you're giving khutbahs before, I guarantee you if you have video recordings of yourself from back in the day, you will not be able to watch your own sound. Yeah, and it's embarrassing. Right? And alhamdulillah that, people didn't record us when we were this embarrassing online. We'd be cancelled. All of us would be cancelled. Like, this guy not in this person ever in our majalis. You know how to give a khutbah. Or this is it's all fluff. They say this wrong. But because it's a skill and it needs to be harnessed. So speaking is a domain which is essential for leadership and for growth. And khutbah becomes a door for further greatness in the pursuit. What are we going to cover inshallah? We're going to talk about what is Jumu'ah. We're going to talk about the etiquettes of Jumu'ah. Talk about practical principles that we can use, which are called maxims. We'll talk about how to choose a topic. At the end of these 4 things, hopefully, right before 3:30. So right before 3:30, we're going to try and assign a few topics to people, right? Like a 2 minute. There's different components of great talk. So we'll talk about that, and then after we come back from the break, we're going to have you guys a mini khutbah, not a khutbah. Okay, we'll be here all day, but mini khutbahs or sections of the khutbah. Lousy ending, but because of no one remembers the topic anyways. There are ways is it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You have to get all the pieces in the right place, and when you do it, you get the whole picture, right? And so that's what we're learning, inshallah ta'ala. Okay. So first off, what is Jumu'ah? I always say this in every single workshop because people see me here and have this mindset that the public speaking of a certain group of people, it has to be innate. People are born with it, like natural charisma and all of these other things. Yeah, maybe there's some truth to all that stuff, but I'm going to give an anomaly, something that puts a spanner into that theory. So I've been giving khutbah since 2012. So for me, this would be 13 years of every single Friday of adult, da'wah. I'm giving khutbahs for the past 13 years. My first khutbah was in 2010. Okay, and let's not talk about it. In 2011, my high school turned out that I'm studying the Sharia and I'm and he called me to give a khutbah at my high school. I graduated already. And when I went to give the khutbah, he had to call me back in his office to reprimand me because he said that that's the worst khutbah that has ever happened in this high school, right? Because of some of the things that I had said, because of the way that I came across. It was very harsh, right? As people are when they're younger, they're not bothered with their arguments. 2014, I was assigned as an imam at a masjid in Mississauga. Then I started giving every single day a khutbah there, every single week. And I realized this is very tough. And I salute all of you guys, mashallah, who gave khutbah every week. I don't know how you do it. It's very tough to get a really good topic every single week, to prepare. This is hard. So I did that for 2 years and I realized this is a lot of my time. And I'm not a full-time imam. So I don't have the time to do this. So in 2016, I know I spoke about this before. In 2016, I found the ultimate khutbah hack. It's a trick. It's literally cheating, but it works. And it works like this. You actually only prepare one khutbah for an entire month. And then every Friday, you go to a different place to deliver the same khutbah. Okay? And so what happens that everywhere you go, so basically you're cheating, right? You're doing 1/4 of the work. So when you go and deliver that khutbah on Friday, the first Friday, it's a little rough around the edges. That's why we give that khutbah at York University. Right? The second one is getting there, and we do that one at Laurier. It's getting there. The third one, it's pretty solid. We do that at Waterloo. All right? And the fourth one is that you can film it now, you can record it, everything's memorized, it comes off, flows of the tongue. We do that one at UTM, right? Because it's close to my workplace, right? Point is that once that happened, Khutbah for me changed from a task. Oh, you have to do this as a responsibility. Masjid imams have to do that. Every Friday they have to prep for the khutbah. And if they're doing right by the khutbah, it's a lot of work. But for me, because I was only doing one khutbah at a time, it turned into something else. It turned into an opportunity to study things that people weren't studying and address things that people weren't addressing. Right? And then I got 1 month to do this prep for the next month. If you could do this, I would highly recommend doing that. That you only prepare one khutbah, but then you practice that multiple times. So this is, you think this is cheating? Yeah, I cheat so much. Every 4th Friday of the month, so this was yesterday, there's a halaqah that happens in Kitchener for working professionals, like young professionals. And what do you think my topic is for that halaqah? It's the Jumu'ah khutbah, right? Because these guys aren't at the universities, so they have no idea what I've been doing on every Friday, so they get that. Every 2nd Sunday, there's a halaqah for high schoolers in Milton, right? What do you think my topic is for that? It's the Jumu'ah khutbah, right? What happens is that if you've taken this one concept and you've, for example, this month, I wasn't able to come to the 3rd Friday here because I was in the UK for a conference. But this month, I've been speaking about a principle in the Sharia, which is that you want things to be difficult on you and easier on everyone around you. This is a principle of zuhud in the religion. That you take the religion on seriously for yourself, and for everyone else, if they're falling short, you're tolerant, you make excuses, you do islah, you're very kind. But when it comes to yourself, you don't give yourself a lot of room to sort of get relaxed in disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a principle. You're not supposed to feel sorry for yourself, you're not supposed to play the victim, right? You're supposed to take the khudil kitaba bi quwwa. Allah says to Yahya, Ya Yahya, khudil kitaba bi quwwa. Take this seriously, right? So what do you think happens like after you've talked about it for 6 times, 7 times? You've had insights too. Then people have told you stuff. It's like, hey, your khutbah reminded me of this. And like now you have something else to add to your list. You've memorized more because you're fixated on that topic. So by the time the month is ending, you've memorized a lot more to do with that. This is what I would recommend ideally, especially if you're not a full-time imam, which is the case for all of you. Otherwise, preparing a Jummah khutbah every single Friday, and that khutbah also has to be the best khutbah. Remember, the intention is, the khutbah you're giving is the best khutbah ever given today around the world. That's your niyyah. That's your drive. It's very difficult to do that every single week. Right? Okay. When I was growing up, I was diagnosed with severe dyslexia, which meant that I was a slow learner, which meant that I couldn't read until I was in grade 4. Okay, I couldn't tie my laces until grade 3, right? Most of I went to a private school. I have exams from my school where there's like complete blanks. Like there's no answers because I couldn't understand the question. And when I was younger, because I wasn't diagnosed at that time, the teachers just thought I was disobedient or naughty and not listening. And so obviously with that also came speech impediments. So until I was in grade 5, I had a slur in my speech. I had stuttered, right? The reason I'm telling you that is your background and the fact that perhaps you haven't been given khutbah like some of the shabab you've been giving khutbah for many years, right? I think 10 khutbahs, 15 khutbahs, 20, 30, 40, 50. They've been giving khutbahs for a long time. Some of you might not have started yet. And that's fine. It's completely fine. It's a growth process, right? Okay, let's get into it. So the hukm for the khutbah of Jumu'ah and for the Salat al-Jumu'ah comes directly from the Quran, right? It's 62:9, Surah 62, verse number 9. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu idha nudiya lis-salati min yawmil Jumu'ah. O people who claim to believe, when you are called for the prayer on the day of Jumu'ah, فَاسْعَوْا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. then you must prioritize going to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Why did I translate this as prioritize? Fasa'u means to hasten. Why over here in this surah, in this ayah, it means prioritize. Does anyone know? It usually means hasten, speed up. Yes. No, I'm saying why over here the word fasa'u, it means prioritize. It doesn't mean to rush. Yes.
I would say other prayers, you can move the time, you can kind of time them around.
Very good. There's a window to pray in. Excellent. Right, but Jumu'ah is a specific time, there's no window. For example, if you miss the official Jumu'ah in your city, in your majlis, you're like, oh, inshallah, we'll do another Jumu'ah half an hour from now. Can you dictate that, or do the masjid have to dictate that? You can't dictate that, yes.
Because you should walk to the masjid.
Very good. There is an explicit hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that you should not rush to go to the masjid, right, for Jumu'ah. You should not rush. Therefore, they say that, how do you understand فَسَعُوا إِلَى ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ? It means to leave other things. And that's what the next passage says, وَذَرُوا الْبَيْعِ, right? And you leave trade, buying and selling. Basically, the thing that is occupying you, you put it on the shelf. That's the idea. And what do we call that in English? To prioritize. Do this instead of other things. We call that prioritization. So this is not like a physical rushing, right? It's prioritizing Jumu'ah over other things. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is informing us of. On the day of Jumu'ah, you make it about Jumu'ah. You don't make it about other things. Right? That's why your whole schedule, when right now you might not have access or control over your schedule, depending on what program you're in. You might not be able to do a different class at this time or whatever. When you get a little older, these are the kind of conversations you need to have with an employer, for example. Right? When you're negotiating your contract and things like that, about half-day Fridays, right? A lot of Muslims, I'm sure you know a lot of them as well, have half-day Fridays. It's a culture within the Muslims. To the point where someone was telling me that, he's a hiring manager for Google, and he was saying, he's in Misaga, as a community member of ours, and he was saying that it's just understood now in the work culture, in the tech industry, that Muslims take half-day Fridays. And I thought that was so cool. Like it's just understood, right? Like HR departments just know in the tech industry that Muslims just take half-day Fridays. This is just the thing, right? It's a really cool thing to have, by the way, because is it officially the case for everyone that they're taking half-day Fridays? And by the way, is half-day Fridays, doesn't that sound like a little shady from an employee perspective? Like, this guy is making a long weekend every weekend, right? But it's an understood reality that no, it's a religious exemption. It's understood, right? Also, Fridays should be different from all other days of the week. Like the way you carry yourself on Fridays should be different. What do I mean by that? Your clothing is different because you wear your best clothes to Jumu'ah, right? The way that you are with people should also change, especially if you have a family. It's like younger kids. Why? Because we forget things from our childhood. We do. Does anyone have clear, vivid memories from when they were 3 years old? No, you don't. But the way people made you feel and the connections and the bonds that you had when you were very young, they shape our interactions in the future. And memory is a very powerful thing. And a lot of it's subliminal. So let me give you an example. I'm not trying to offend anyone, okay? During December break, do people report high spirits of contentment or low spirits of contentment? What do you think generally when people are polled? Do people usually feel good on Christmas break, or are they not feeling good? Generally speaking, this poll is done in multiple cities in Europe, in America. I don't know about any Canadian polls on this, but people generally say that their most favorite time of the year is that. You know why that is? It's because of Christmas marketing, right? Because there's an association to joy during the holiday season. How does that there? From lights to decorations to malls to advertisements to bingos. There is a vibe of positivity and joy that permeates the community and society. This is why you find that non-Christians who are polled also suggest that their most contentment time of the year is that, because they're part of the subculture, whether you like it or not. So what can you do, especially if you have children? Well, you can make Jumu'ah special, right? So like in my family, my kids aren't allowed a lot of sweets, but in Jumu'ah, they know is ice cream day. They know this. So they wait the whole day, a whole week, because they know they're going to have Jumu'ah, and Jumu'ah is an ice cream day. Right? These are little things, but if you have to give someone a gift, like you bought something for your child, you wait. You bought it on Tuesday because it was on sale, and you were shopping on Tuesday and you picked it up. Don't give it to them on Tuesday. Wait till Jumu'ah. Right? And link positivity with Jumu'ah. So growing up, they will just wake up on Friday and they won't even know, but they're going to feel great. And that's going to reflect on their actions. That's going to reflect on the way they treat other people. That's going to reflect on the way they go to Jumu'ah. They spend time at Jumu'ah. Right? So, what is Jumu'ah? There's many conceptions of it. One conception of it, think about it, is to be a weekly CPR of committing oneself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have different wake-up calls throughout our day. Right? Salah is a wake-up call daily that we get 5 times a day. Hajj is a lifetime wake-up call. It's like, get your act together. Right? Jumu'ah is the weekly version. Every year we have an annual version too. It's Ramadan. Like, get your act together. But then you have a weekly version as well. And that's Jumu'ah. Every week we are resuscitated in our iman. It's tajdeedul iman. Every Jumu'ah we get to redefine and let go and then start up again fresh. So this is important, because who do you think is doing the resuscitation on Jumu'ah? For everybody in the majlis. The Khateeb. Yeah? And would you want someone to perform CPR on you who's not trained in first response training? No, because they got to break ribs and nothing happens to you. Right? So that's why it's important for the Khateeb to know what they're doing, because they're the ones who are resuscitating the rest of the qawm. Number 1. Jumu'ah is also a social ritual. Right? Because their rituals in Islam can be personal, where no one's involved. But there are other rituals that involve other people. Jumu'ah obviously involves other people, right? Jama'ah is to gather. Jumu'ah is the ultimate weekly gathering, right? Traditionally speaking, therefore, you were not allowed to have multiple Jumu'ahs, right? A city would have one Jumu'ah. All madhabs agree on this, by the way, right? There's one main Jumu'ah. So let me ask you guys this. How many masjids were there in Medina at the time of the Prophet? Masjids in Medina, not outside of Medina, in Medina. No, just Medina, the city of Medina. One. How many prayer spots or musallas did we have in the vicinity? 19. 19. These would be your neighborhood musallas. So a lot of people, we understand that every Sahabi was praying every prayer behind the Prophet ﷺ. It's not true. This is not true. This is why you have many hadith where someone comes to the Prophet and complains about their imam. They say, well, our imam was doing this, our imam was doing that. Yes. Outside of Medina, right? Medina, the vicinity of Medina, one main masjid, right? And then a lot of what we call neighborhood musallas. I don't know if you guys have this. Anyone have a neighborhood musalla where you live? Okay. Yeah, look, this is what should happen. But, technically speaking, in fiqh, those neighborhood musallas should not have a Jumu'ah. On Jumu'ah at Dhuhr, there is no salah. You have to go to the Masjidul Bilad, to the main city, to the main masjid of the city. And this would have been like the Masjid al-Nabawi, where everyone gathers. Like your whole community is there. Why? Because a united message has to come across. This is why. Because a message is being delivered. And for that message, people have to be gathered in one place. And that's what Jumu'ah is supposed to be. Yes, sir. Yeah, we'll talk about this, because ideally this is not supposed to happen anyways, but we are in the realm of fatwa, not in the realm of fiqh. Fiqh happens in ideal situations. We're not in ideal situations. In an ideal situation, who's supposed to be the khateeb? Not you and me, right? In an ideal situation, the khateeb is who? Does anyone know? Imagine if after the Prophet passed away, who's the khateeb? The khalifa. Because of religious authority or political authority? What do you think? Political authority. This is why the famous ai that you guys know of, that were the most knowledgeable people in their city, like Abu Hanifa. How many khutbahs did Abu Hanifa give in his life? 0. Was he not the most knowledgeable of the people of Kufa? What about Malik ibn Anas? Imam Malik, the Imam of Medina. How many khutbahs do you think he gave in Masjid al-Nabi? He taught from Masjid al-Nabi every day. How many khutbahs did he give in the masjid where he was the shaykh? 0. Why? Because that maqam was for the political authority. It wasn't for religious authority. So who was giving the khutbah? The person giving the khutbah was appointed by the Khalifa to give khutbah in that region. Why? What was the point of this? It was to gather everyone together in one place and talk about those things that be relevant for the unification of the people. Our conception of Jumu'ah is not the legal conception of Jumu'ah that you find in books of fiqh. It's just a fact. So we're in the realm of fatwa, which is, this is unprecedented territory, people. This is why when the Ottoman Caliphate fell, in 1926 there was a convention in Egypt where the scholars got together from around the world, talked about, is Jumu'ah valid? I'm not making this up. Why do they think Jumu'ah is not valid anymore? Yes? Yeah, there's no one to assign a khateeb because there's no standard khalifa. Right? There's no system. So Jumu'ah is from ahkam sultaniya, which means it's not a community affair. It's a politically managed act of amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar. So since we don't have a political authority, then chaos brew. And for the first couple of years, in many places around the world, from 1924 to 1926, there was no Jumu'ah. Because fuqaha took that position. Of course, that position later on is now disappeared. I don't think anyone, I don't know, this could be wrong. I know people who hold the position that the Jumu'ah is, you have to go pray Jumu'ah. It's a must. But this is not ideal. Because the conception of a Jumu'ah is from the ahkam sultaniya. And since there's no sultan, then this is not really the optimal. There's a lot of people who hold this position, even from amongst my teachers. But no one's saying, hey, there's no such thing as a Jumu'ah. But there was a time in our history where Jumu'ah was not established in the major cities of Islam because of this issue. All right? So, third, it must be prioritized over all things on Friday. Right? Next, it's an event by which order is restored. Right? This is why, from the Ahkam al-Sultaniya perspective, from a political perspective, this is where you discussed issues and edicts and policies, and also reminded people of the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why today, you guys know there's a masjid, I won't mention its name, but today, there's a masjid that used the transcript of previous Jumu'ahs from the Ottoman Empire. It's in Mississauga. And so they read it off. Interesting enough, they're reading off at the end, du'as for the health of the Sultan. Right? I don't think the Khateeb knows Arabic, to be honest. But he is, like, he's making dua for the health of the Sultan and all these things. Because everyone would have been doing that, by the way. This thing that he's reading would have been read from every single masjid across. Because who decided what content in the khutbah would be? There was a department under the government that was responsible for writing out the khutbahs for all of the mayors around and the governors around the caliphate. So they were basically just like messengers of the king. Right? That's what Jumu'ah was. Yes? I don't want to share that. Yeah. But you can go to it after, when things aren't being recorded. Yes. It is perhaps the only time that some people get any access to reminders of knowledge. This is true. Right? So can you imagine at McMaster University, because they did the polling there, there's close to about 55,000 students at McMaster University on a given term. 12,000 are Muslims. That's incredible. Like, I first heard that, I'm like, something's going to be wrong. Something's off. It's like, no. He's like, what's that? 12,000 students are registered Muslims. 12,000. That's insane. That's like a quarter almost. That's almost a quarter of McMaster's population is Muslim. Okay? They get maximum about 600 to 700 across their Jumu'ahs. on a given Friday. So the hope is that a lot of people are going to their local masajid, they don't have class Friday. But the reality is that even people coming to Jumu'ah are a fraction of the actual Muslim population. This is fair. And then those people coming to Jumu'ah, out of the 600-700 people at McMaster that are coming to Jumu'ah, how many people do you think are, this is it, this is the only time, 15-20 minutes, where they hear any reminders about Allah and His Messenger and the Quran and righteousness? That's going to be the majority. Majority people aren't sitting in halaqat like this, taking notes, understanding their religion deeply. That's not the majority. This is the bubble. You are a minority of a minority. Yes? The majority are completely disconnected from this stuff. The only connection they have is that Jumu'ah. That's it. And they will walk up to the Jumu'ah, and for their fortune, they find you as the khateeb. And it's your job to connect the disconnected. Right? So it's a pretty burdensome task from that perspective. And then it is an added religious responsibility on us, right? Because it is a responsibility. It's not a perk. It's a responsibility. So what is the ruling of Jumu'ah? This might be a little small for your screens. Okay. The hukum of Jumu'ah does not change much based on the fiqh. The vast majority of the fuqaha across madhabs have an agreement on the importance of Jumu'ah. So we're just going to read this off. This is translated by one of my teachers. According to the Hanafi school, and as I said, the other schools are not going to differ much, the Friday prayer is decisively established. It means it's qat'i. What does that mean? That means the text that tells us that it's going to be established is both authentic, right? And it is both explicit. So if a ruling comes from an authentic and explicit text, then you deem it to be decisive. There's no room for debate or controversy. It becomes qat'i. And personally obligatory, which means every single adult, sane Muslim man, adult, sane Muslim man, has to comply by it, and they're excused if they're sick or traveling. Right? But every single sane, adult, Muslim man has to perform their Jumu'ah, except they're excused if they're sick or traveling. Right? And that's what he means by its conditions. Okay? So when the fuqaha say conditions of something which is fard, this is what they mean. The obligation is established from the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the verse that we just read to you, 62:9. Right? O believers, when proclamation is made for prayer on the day of congregation, hasten to God's remembrance. I would not translate as hasten for the reasons I suggested. It would say prioritize God's remembrance and leave your trading. The remembrance here refers to, by the way, it's saying leave your trading because it's in the middle of the day and it's for adults. This is very important. It's in the middle of the day, and isn't Jumu'ah mandatory for adults? For grown men? Okay. Where would grown men be in the middle of the day in 7th century Arabia? At work. Okay? The idea of being in school for a grown person would have been just weird for the Arabs. Right? It would have been weird for a lot of our history, by the way. Right? You study as a child. Till you get older, you have to sort of do your thing as a man. Right? But we will extend this to say anything that is preoccupying you. Right? Trade, bay'ah is what's preoccupying most of the people in that milieu. For us, it might be school, it might be classes. Right? It might be a sporting event. It might be a conference, a meeting. It doesn't matter. Anything that is preoccupying you would go in this category. The remembrance here refers to the prayer itself. Some said that it refers to the sermon, and some said it refers to both. Either way, it establishes obligation. Okay? It is also established from the words of the Prophet ﷺ from a longer narration. Know that Allah Most High has made the Friday prayer obligatory upon you. So this is a hadith from Ibn Majah. And whoever misses 3 Friday prayers will be by taking the matter lightly. So they do takhfif of the amr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They don't take it very seriously. This person has heavy consequences, to the point where the narration says Allah will seal his heart towards further guidance You'll no longer be guided. Right? So there's a spiritual closing that will take place for someone who neglects Jumu'ah. Why is this the case? Who is inviting people to Jumu'ah? If I want, look, when the MSA wanted to invite people to this event, did they have to market the event? Did they have to make a poster? Did they have to post it somewhere to tell people? Yes. If someone is getting married, right? Is anyone going to just randomly show up? No, they'd have to be given an invitation. They'd be told that the RSVP, all of this stuff, right? When events happen at mass scales, they have to be marketed. Who does the marketing for Jumu'ah? Does the MSA ever market Jumu'ah, by the way? You ever see a poster like, please come to Jumu'ah, right? We're going to do Jumu'ah in this place. No, it's information. They inform you where Jumu'ah is going to be, what time it's going to be. Are they trying to like market Jumu'ah? Please RSVP for Jumu'ah. Is there anything that ever happened like that? Who markets for Jumu'ah in the masjids? Does any masjid market in their neighborhood communities? Please, we do this thing called Friday prayers. I would like you to come. Does any masjid around the world market? So I'm asking you, who markets for Jumu'ah? Who does? Yes. Allah has marketed Jumu'ah through Iman in people's hearts. It's their Iman that brings them to the masjid. Therefore, everyone at the masjid, everyone at the musalla, whether it's a musalla, a makeshift musalla like we have on campuses, or an official musalla, official masjid, whose bayt is it? It's Allah's house. Which means everyone there is whose guest? Is Allah's guest. Now let me give you a scenario. I invite everyone here to my house. Say after this event, we're going to my house and we'll do readings. Or we'll eat some food or something. Okay? And we all go there.
I'm down with that.
Yeah, that's it. Let's say after this, we're all going to my place. We're going to go and then we're just going to have some desserts. Okay. Now, let's say you have a problem. Let's say you have a problem with him. Okay? Is this your house that you hash out your problems? Is this your house? Are you at someone else's house? And out of honor for me, even if you do have a problem with him, would anything happen in that vicinity? No, it won't. So the masjid is the same way. That's why if you ever have a problem with someone in the masjid, you're never supposed to deal with that problem in the masjid. During salah time or before salah or after that, because this is not your house. And this is why you can't just put your stuff anywhere you want at the masjid. That's why if the organizers have an organized, here's where the shoes go, here's where the jackets go. You have to comply because this is not your thing to do whatever you want with. People really have to understand that the masjid is Allah's house. Everyone there is called. They're not just there. It's not random. It's not accidental. Everyone there is called based on something in their heart that Allah has chosen them to be in this vicinity. They're all guests of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And Khateeb more so than everybody else should be mindful of that. Therefore, as the text states, it is explicitly even more emphasized than the noon prayer. So Jummah is more emphasized in the text than the Dhuhr prayer. And it is what is called for on Fridays. The Muslims have concurred from the time of the Prophet ﷺ. When he says this, it means ijma'. There's ijma' on this. Until this day of ours that the Friday prayer is obligatory. So this is an ijma' issue. Friday is not optional. Okay? So other schools comment in similar light. The ihtiram, which is the cautious position, is one extends towards Jummah, is meant to be more severe than the other pursuits throughout the week. What that means is that Jummah is supposed to be the highlight of your week. You're supposed to put more effort into this event than any other event. Right? You're supposed to have more concentration of getting this right than any other thing that you're doing throughout the week, which should reflect in your dress code. So the way that you dress on campus on a Monday and a Tuesday and a Thursday and a Wednesday, it has to be different than the way you dress on Friday. That's what it means, right? The way that you schedule yourself, the way you schedule your meal. Because if you feel like you're too full for the Jumu'ah, then you know the ulama said, قِلَّةُ الطَّعَامِ قَبْلَ الْعِبَادَةِ, that you're supposed to reduce the amount of food that you're eating before worship. And that's why, I don't know anybody you go to who leads Salah in Ramadan, the Taraweeh prayer, they'll tell you, you're not supposed to do this buffet thing before like this iftar buffet stuff that we're so accustomed to. You're not supposed to do that if you're leading the salah. Nobody does it. People, go ask those guys. The rest of us enjoy Ramadan, right? The imams of Taraweeh, it's a heavy thing for them. This is a difficult time for them. They're all like stressed out, then they get their stuff memorized and get it right. Why? Because they have a sense of responsibility, right? And so, even with regards to Jumu'ah, what will maximize your Jumu'ah prayer? If maximizing a Jumu'ah prayer, if that means that you're going to go to a particular masjid because you have a spiritual awakening here and it's part of the thing that gets you in your spiritual zone, then you should do that, right? Whatever maximizes your Jumu'ah pursuits. Right, so what are the etiquettes of Jumu'ah? So the first one is that there is a physical difference in Jumu'ah than other places. So a famous hadith of Salman al-Farsi who says, the Prophet ﷺ said, on the day of gathering, Jumu'ah, every man who bathes, so the ghusl of Jumu'ah. And this is ikhtilaf, some people said this is sunnah mu'akkada, some people said no, this is wajib, and some people said this is mustahab. Either way, it's really important. Either way, it's really, really important to do the ghusl on Jumu'ah, on the day of Jumu'ah. To the point where one of my teachers said that if the sister who is menstruating and she's not even going to perform the prayer, even for her it's best that out of practice for Fridays and to keep her practice on, that she continues to bathe, to do the ghusl on Jumu'ah. Cleans whatever he can of himself, applies oil or perfume, exits his house after entering the masjid, does not split two people sitting together, which is from the etiquettes of Jumu'ah, right? Which is in order to find a spot which is in the front, you don't like hop over people and like, you know, do you guys know people do that? They like put their hands on two people's shoulders who move them apart and then like jump over. And that's what the Prophet said, don't do that. Like don't be a nuisance to other people because you want to be in a spiritual state. How ridiculous does that sound? Like I need to be in a spiritual zone, so I need to get to that spot, which is in the second saf. And right now, these two people in the fifth saf, I need to disrupt their worship, their concentration, and their sense of safety to get to my sense of safety. Like you can't do that. Right? Praise whatever is prescribed for him and remain silent while the Imam speaks. All his sins that he has committed between this Jummah and the next Jummah will be forgiven. So the Jummah is supposed to be purging. There's not a single one of us, by the way, who throughout the week wouldn't want to get a restart button on Friday. Every single Friday we can be cleansed of everything we've done from the last Friday to this Friday. Unless it was a major egregious sin, then we have to make tawbah for. But all minor sins are taken care of just by Jumu'ah. Just by Jumu'ah. That's it. But you have to take it seriously, like the way the Prophet ﷺ is describing it. The second thing is the outward protocol. So the Prophet ﷺ talked about the outward protocol of the Jumu'ah, which is what the hadith I just read out to you. The only difference here is that he says he does not step over people's necks, right? Which is the same thing as he doesn't separate two people. This also mentions he wears his best clothes. This narration from Abu Dawud also mentions he wears best clothes. This is what I meant. The way you dressed on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday has to be different from the way that you dress on a Friday. Okay? And you know, our community doesn't have this now, but there was a convert in one of the communities that I witnessed, where he would wear a suit every single Jummah, right? And the Sheikh, local Imam, said, you know, I have to say, I really like that you wear a suit. He said, I don't understand why everyone doesn't wear a suit. Because he's a convert from Christianity, and you don't go to church except in a suit on Sunday, right? Because you have to wear your best clothes. So what's the best thing in your closet? Like literally, that's the question. What is the best thing in your closet? That's what you're wearing to Jumu'ah. The most dignified thing in your closet. That's what you're supposed to wear to Jumu'ah. That's the idea. Then proceed to the masjid as early as possible. Again, as students, this is important. As students, this is important because our schedules are pretty much not in our control, but sometimes they are. And when they are, for example, you're off on a Friday and you don't have a class from like 12 to 2 or something like that. You're off. Okay, then what do? You get to the masjid and the musalla early as possible. As early as possible. Why? Because there's an attendance that is taken. The Prophet tells us that on Jummah, an attendance is taken. What does he say? Abu Hurairah reports, the Prophet said, on the day of Jummah, angels stand by the masjid door. Angels stand by the masjid door, writing the names of the first person to enter and the next, and so on and so on. So they're taking an attendance. Oh, this person showed up. Next person showed up. They're making an attendance. The person who leaves his house early is like the one who gives a sacrificial camel as a gift. So the reward of it is equivalent to giving a sacrificial camel. Then the next person is like the one who gives a cow as a gift. So a cow is not as expensive as a camel, but it's very expensive. Then the next one is like giving a ram, then a chicken, then an egg, meaning in value, the reward decreases based on where you are on this list of attendance. If you're high up there, then it's higher reward. If you're lower, then the reward is lower. And then when did they stop taking attendance? When the imam comes out to deliver his sermon, the angels roll up their scrolls and listen to the dhikr attentively, which means no more names are being written down. Yes?
How does this apply when there are multiple jumu'ahs? I'm late to the first jumu'ah, so rather than go while the imam's talking, I'll go to the next open jumu'ah.
Very good question. Excellent question. So the way that this is understood, Ibn Battal talks about this, by the way. The way that this is understood is that there has to be a initiative taking and an excitement, and I am ready to come to the early prayer mindset towards Jumu'ah, right? So if you come with the mindset that I'm going to come early to the 1:30 Jumu'ah, like the khutbah begins at 1:30, then what does early mean? Remember, the angels are going to roll up their scrolls at 1:30 when the imam starts to speak. Right? And if you come at 1:29, your reward is not the same as someone who comes at 1:25. It's not the same as someone who comes at 1:15. And it's not the same as someone who comes at 1 o'clock. Right? And this is why in the Muslim world, by the way, this is norm, that people go early for Jummah and read Kahf. I'm not making this up. Many places. For example, in Morocco, this is the norm. In Morocco, you go to Jummah at like noon, well before the sun leaves its zenith. So well before Dhuhr time. You go to the masjid, and you go there, you sit there, and you read Surah Kahf. This is very common in Morocco. It's very common, for example, in parts of Balochistan, where I'm from. It's very common. The local masajids, this is how they operate. However, does this mean that if someone comes to campus and they have class and then they rush into class, that's all fine. However, if possible, in those circumstances you're mentioning, it's better to be early to a Jummah Salah than catch a Jummah Salah late. It's better to be early to a Jummah Salah than, for example, if the Iqamah is going to go at 2 p.m. and your class finishes at 1:30, and by the time you go leave your class and join this Jummah, it's going to be around 1:40, 1:45, right? You're joining in mid khutbah. Is this valid? It's valid. What's preferred? 2:30 there's also a Salah. And for this Salah, if you just wait a little bit and you get to the Musalla area at 2, the other Salah is going to be finishing, then you're early for this Salah, and this is fine and valid. Because your attitude is, I want to get to my majlis, which is the majlis of your Salah, early. Right? So I hope that answers your question. Okay. If possible, walk to the masjid rather than driving. I guess this is easy for people in Waterloo because everything is walking here, right? The parking lots are so far away, right? And no one parks does anyone park at the SLC parking slot? No, okay, a couple of people. Yeah, but usually even by the way, some of the ulama mentioned this, even if you are driving to the masjid, it's better to drive to the masjid and park really far and then walk to the masjid. So if you go early, most masjids now that are being built, alhamdulillah, they have to be built by code, right? Because that wasn't happening in the 90s and the early 2000s. That's why you have this big masjid with a tiny parking lot, which is not legal, by the way, right? But now it's changing. So most masajids are trying to build proper parking spaces. If you look at the big masjids that are recently built in the past 10 years, they have a massive parking space, alhamdulillah. In these cases, if you're early, where should you park? Not the closest spot, the farthest spot. The farthest possible spot, that's where you park if you're early. The next person parks beside that guy. The third person parks beside. So if you're late to Jummah, where do you find parking? Closest to the masjid. So you miss less of your prayer. That's how it should be. And also, the people who come first get more reward. Because the longer you walk, for every walk in one riwayah, sins are being removed. Every step you take to the masjid, sins are being removed. And that is more valid for people who are parking far. Yes? Yeah, good question. So the hukum on people who live in the Bawadi, in the tribal areas, was that they were excused from sort of this hukum. Why? Because they had to use mounts to come, donkeys, camels, horses to come, right? And remember, these people weren't doing any of their other prayers in the masjid. They were praying only Jummah in the masjid, because they were doing everything else in the local musallas around them. But for Jummah, there's no Jummah in the Bawadi. You have to do Jummah in the balad, in the city. And so they don't have to travel in to do the Jummah. This is why you have that issue when Eid falls at the same time as Jummah. You guys know that famous controversy that happens? If Eid falls on Jummah, what happens? Because now you have two congregational prayers. You have the Eid prayer in the morning, and then you have the Jummah prayer in the afternoon. So what happens? That's where you have the hadith, and this is Imam Ahmad's school's position, that people of the Bawadi, right, they don't have to do Jumu'ah because they come out for Eid, and they can't go back and then come back because it's not practical. That's why you have those rulings. It doesn't apply to us, by the way. You guys have to do both prayers. Okay, but the hukum is there for people who live in the outskirts of somewhere where there's no actual congregational prayer, then they attend one congregational prayer and then return to their families. Yes?
So, Eid prayers here, for example, we all do it in Brim Park.
Yes.
Yeah, so everyone all over Waterloo usually goes there.
Yes.
In an ideal scenario,
Yes.
are we supposed to do our Jummahs there? Or like having it
Oh,
there
good
like
question.
the prayer? Is it
Yeah.
the ideal scenario?
So there are three cases, okay? First case is of a regular fard prayer, like Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha. And the whole point of these prayers is supposed to be as easy and accessible to everyone. This is why, you know the way you guys have it, that there is a musalla here, there's a musalla as SLC, right? This is exactly how it should be. That anywhere who's in one end of the campus can go to any of these 5 daily prayers in about 5 to 10 minutes, they're there. In your neighborhoods, in about 5 to 10 minutes, you're there at the masjid. Why? Because you do your fard prayer, you leave, you go back home. And then you have a normal life, whatever your life is. But you have to do that temporary hijrah for the fard prayer, for men. It's a temporary hijrah, right? You have to leave everything, move, go into a spiritual zone, then leave and come back. That should be as easy as possible. And by the way, if there's no musalla in your community, you can designate your house as a musalla. It's that simple. And then tell all your neighbors in your neighborhood, hey, we do 5 daily prayers, and this is my basement like code password thing. Just come in, we'll do salah together, and then you can leave. Then you have the Jummah. The Jummah is supposed to be the city masjid. You have to have the center masjid. The way that, for example, in the Abbasids started to do this, the Ottomans did this as well, the Seljuks did this as well, the Mughals did this as well. Muslim architects made the masjid in the center, and then they made the souk, like a distant away from the masjid, around the market, the plazas, and then beyond that, they did the houses and residentials. So everyone on the day of Jummah would go to the center of the city. And the main salah is going to happen, Jummah is going to happen in the big masjid. Right? And that's why those masjids are massive. If you go to the Muslim world and you actually go to some of these city masjids, they are massive, like unbelievably massive. I was in Manchester, I was in London, and I went to the East London Masjid. Dude, this thing was a block. Have anyone been to the East London Masjid? This thing was a block on its own. You've been to there, right? It's a block on its own. It's unbelievable. 8,000 people pray there. 8,000 people pray the Jummah Salah there every single Friday. It is unbelievable. That's a city masjid. So there should be nothing going on because you pray your masjid there. Then you have the third level, which is the 2 Eid Salah, and they have to happen in a maidan. They happen right outside the city, and it's like supposed to be every single city masjid has now come together and do this one Eid prayer. Right? So that's a different level. So the Jummah doesn't have to be a Rim Park. The Eid prayer is supposed to be in some place like that. Right? To accommodate thousands and thousands of people. The entire community comes out. Why? Because you want women, elderly, children, everyone comes out to those prayers. Right? Okay. Number 5, yes.
Do you mind if I ask a question right now?
Yeah, of course.
So one scenario that I just wanted some advice on is, either at the end of last term or the beginning of this term, we had some brothers who are in first year, so they're not as comfortable skipping classes yet.
Okay.
And they had a full course, right? So on Fridays, they reached out to us for some advice. I wasn't really sure how to like address this or tell. So basically, they said that every Jumu'ah time that we offer, they have an important class that they don't
Okay.
want to skip.
And you offer multiple, right? You like 2, 3 options.
Yeah. So we have 3 options, but their entire Friday, like from 12 to 4 or whatever, is filled with classes. So what they wanted to do is do like a small Jumu'ah, like a group of 5 or 10 of them, like right outside the lecture hall, and then just go back in. And how would you go about like advising people like this who may be worried about, like every Friday they're missing an important class, they don't want to fall behind and stuff like this, and they want to do their own congregation, but we know it's preferred that everyone come together.
Yeah, good question. So Shaykhana Dr. Akram Nadwi, his position on this, and more comfortable with just referring to other people who've researched these issues and just say what they're saying. He said that as long as it doesn't become the norm. So you can give this fatwa to them and then assign one of them as an imam and do the bare minimum Jummah, meaning it should not have the bells and whistles of an actual Jummah. So it shouldn't happen, for example, at the SLC Musalla area, or it shouldn't happen here, because these are for the official Jummahs. So they're doing, so the place has to be different. It's not a long khutbah, it's very short, it's bare minimum Jummah, because they just want the legal check mark that they've prayed their Jummah, so they're not sinful for not praying their Jummah. And then inshallah ta'ala, the hope is that it doesn't become something that's marketable, because you don't want this to be the norm amongst people. It's like, this is what we're doing. No, you want the norm to be that people prioritize the official Jummah. So it should not be marketed, it should be low-key, and it should be something that is given with the bare minimum facilitation, right? Even if that means the MSA doesn't never get involved. It's like, yeah, you do your thing, this is the process by which you do it. We're hoping next term you'll mature up and come to actual Jummah. Okay?
Sorry, follow up. Do you think that, or don't you think that giving them permission to kind of do this would like serve as an example to other people that they can also say like,
Yeah, this is why I said it can't be something marketed.
Okay.
Because what happens is that this is the lesser thing to do, correct? Everyone understands this, the lesser version of the salah. Problem is if the MSA is okay with the lesser, then the lesser becomes the norm to other people. And so you don't want that. That's why this is a exemption or a fatwa of exemption. It's a rukhsa given to this group of people. It's not the azima. The azima is going to be you pray the official Jummah. This is the rukhsa. And the rukhsa is never supposed to be for the masses. It's supposed to be specific to the scenario. Yeah.
As an addendum to that kind of thing, I can't miss a Jum'ah, like I have to even be off my limits that, like, including, for example, final exams. Like, you have like final exam and
Yeah. So with the final exam, there can be religious exemptions that the university provides. So you have to speak to your professors and get that. Sometimes, like for example, at McMaster, they give extra time. So if you're missing half an hour of your exam, like you either start late or you start early, they can do that. Because as I said, I think it's the student population issue there that they have to address this, because there's too many people. Right? In most cases, if you are going to for sure miss your Jummah because it happens to be on a Friday and this is the case, then what do? For that one day, you do your Dhuhr prayer. You do your Dhuhr prayer. You don't do your Jummah. Okay, you do your Dhuhr prayer, because you cannot orchestrate out of it. If you can orchestrate out of it, then you pray your Jummah, and then whatever the professor is saying that you do to accommodate this, you do that. But if you can't, because what professors will not allow is that if you start the exam and then pause, go to Jummah, and then resume the exam. They will not allow this. Trust me, we've tried this like many places. They will not allow this. And rightly so, right? Because this is dubious, right? From their perspective, it's like, what's this shady? You can't do that. So if there's no way that this is possible, then what you do is that for that one day, you pray your Dhuhr prayer instead. You don't do your Jummah. And Dhuhr, you have a lot of flexibility. Right? Yes. Of course, you just have to talk properly. Yes. Yeah. You guys, I had a professor in my master's, and there was 2 of us. There was a sister, and there was also me, who had we had salah time. It was Maghrib time during our seminars. And we would tell her that we're going to be late for your class for this next 2 weeks, every day, right? Because of our religious obligations. And she said, of course. And she sent an email out to all 35 students saying that class is going to start 15 minutes late for the next 2 weeks. Literally, like 10 minutes after I spoke to her. She's like, so for 2 people, she switched the class time for like 35 students. No discussions with anyone. She's like, yeah, that's not a problem. So I think people just don't speak. Like, you just have to write a good email. Like, just write a nice email or get ChatGPT to do it, right? But converse, that's the idea. Okay. Enter the masjid with your right foot and recite the dua for entering into the masjid, right? Which is to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open the doors of His rahmah. And then exit the masjid with your left and ask Allah for His grace, right? Then sit in the first row behind the prayer leader, so the imam, if space is available. If not, sit as close to the front as possible. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned that if you knew the reward of those who are in the first saf, then you would vie, you would compete and fight to get to that spot. This is why I see this weird culture you guys have seen. Have you seen this? Sorry, is this me? Oops. Bismillah. Have you guys seen this? This culture where, you have people who are going to step back and out of respect to other people say, oh, you go ahead. Have you guys seen this out of courtesy and like being nice? That's not the time to be nice, right? If you have an open spot, you take it, you go up to it. You don't say, no, you first. No, you're supposed to compete with everyone around you towards bir and taqwa. This is a matter of taqwa. So you take the leap first, right? You shouldn't be like, oh no, it's an elderly person, let them go. No, on the day of Judgment, you're not going to care if that person was elderly or younger. You want to have the most amount of khair that you've done, right? So these are certain things that you should keep in mind, inshallah. Procure the nearest available space without walking over people's shoulders. We've already talked about this, right? So you're not a nuisance to everyone else. So like your shoes aren't in a place where they are an obstacle for people getting in, right? Your car is not parked in some waywardly way so that it's blocking other people, right? You're not an inconvenience to other people. That's the idea. Perform 4 rak'ah of sunnah prayer. And so the famous hadith of Tirmidhi, that prior to the 2 rak'ah of jumu'ah and the khutbah, you do 4 rak'ah of sunnah. And then there's also 4 rak'ah after, right? Which is in a different hadith. Make a supplication dua when the imam briefly sits between the 2 sermons. So when the imam is sitting, you do the dua. The madhabs disagree whether you can do it outwardly or not, whether you're moving your lips or not, or you're doing it silently. So there's a disagreement on that. So you can follow your madhab for that. And then finally, perform 4 rak'ah of the sunnah after the dhuhr prayer. So 4 before and 4 after, right? Explicitly from the text of the hadith. 4 before and 4 after. And then throughout the day, you should be making a lot of salawat on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, right? Throughout the day. Okay. And so those are the basic etiquettes that are there for anyone attending the Jummah. Now you tell me, if these are etiquettes that the musallin are supposed to abide by, what about the imam? More so or less so? What do you think? More so. Which is, if you're the khateeb, you're more inclined to this than other people. Some cases you can't help it. For example, the optimum way to come to the Jummah is that you do ghusl before Jummah. And in many cases, the khateeb is coming from work or they're there in the morning to school, they have classes. So they're not going to be able to go home or go to somewhere and do ghusl. So if they compromise and do their ghusl in the morning of Friday. And they can't perhaps do it right before Jumu'ah. Right? So there's certain things that because of logistics, there is compromises. But generally speaking, all of this should be implemented by all the khateebs. Yes?
If I go to the khutbah and the khateeb has already started talking, do I pray the sunnah or do I sit down and pray?
Yeah, this is a madhab issue. Right, it's a madhab issue. So the best thing to do is before you get in, you find a spot, not in the masjid. This is where you can do jama'ah of both opinions. The opinions of the Shafi'i school is that you do the sunnah, you do the tahiyyat al-masjid when you get in, right? And you can combine the intention of the tahiyyat al-masjid as the sunnah of dhuhr as well. The Hanafi and the Maliki schools, they say no, once the imam has started to speak, because the hadith explicitly says listen attentively to the imam, then you can't pray the salah. So what do? Easy fix. Just do your salah right outside the musalla area. And that way you do jama'ah of both opinions, where you've gotten your sunnah in, you've done some form of tahiyyah, and then you come in and join and you listen attentively. All right? Most big masjids have this little enclave outside of the main prayer area. You guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah, that's why they have this. So if you go to any Hanafi or Maliki masjid, you'll see this. Because they're built with this ruling in mind. Right? Which is on Jumu'ah, there's a place before the main musalla area where you can actually do your sunnah and then go in and then sit down and listen. Okay? So that would be the ideal. Okay, let's get to the principles now. So we were so far talking about etiquettes, which is good. Etiquettes are important. But this is what makes the khateeb the actual productive, efficient khateeb. So first of them is that why do we need principles? Why can't we just learn the fiqh of it, learn some things, you guys do your practical stuff, and then we're good? Why do you have to do this whole learning some principles of public speaking and learning the principles of leadership and learning the principles of being a khateeb? Why do you have to do that? Because we don't rise to our goals, we fall to our systems. This is why. This is why. Which means that we're going to have difficult days. And in those difficult days, our goals, we're not going to be able to achieve them. So we won't have the drive to achieve our goals. So what works for you then? What works for you is there's a system that you've created. Simple example. When we leave our homes in the morning, is anyone here comfortable leaving our homes without brushing our teeth? What if you're late? What if you're really late? Yeah? Even then, what are you going to do? Like I know someone and they're always on the move. Right? It's a scholar, so I won't mention his name. He's always on the move. So he's got a hygiene kit in his glove compartment in his car. Because like I'm sometimes like hotel out, in, this, that, this. So he just has it. Because like sometimes I'm going to be very late, so I'll miss it. But the idea is dental hygiene is so important to us as a cultural phenomenon that a lot of us are going to be not okay leaving our houses without brushing our teeth. Yes? Even in days we're sick, even in days where we're tired, even in days where we're late. How did that come to be? It came to be because it's part of our system. Right? This is why a lot of you, how many of you, depending on where you're from, by the way, and your family is from, how many of you wear your shoes inside your homes? Muslims generally don't do this, culturally speaking. Yes? But what if you forgot the keys and they're right there? Right? Yeah, they're right there. It's like, right, you can see it. It's like 6 feet away. And you're just like, oh. Then what happens? Well, in the summer, if there's slippers or something, you just throw your slippers off, you get it. What about in the winter? They're boots. You have to tie them and it's like really, what are you going to do? Everyone's been through this scenario, right? You've gone through this. You see? So if you don't have systems in place, then rules break very easy. But when you have systems in place, then rules remain. So as khateebs, we need to have systems in place. Things that are red lines we'll never cross. We've built systems. Everyone has the goal to give the best khutbah ever. You know who actually will give the best khutbah? The person with the best system. Everyone wants to win the Olympic gold medal when they do start the race. You know who actually wins the gold medal? The person who trained with the best system. That's how it works. Everyone's goals are the same. So what differentiates the winner and the loser? The system, right? The protocol, the policies, the red lines. So that's why we need these principles. We must establish principles, systems, and protocols for all things important in life, right? To take a silly example, right? Like here's a principle that you should always follow when it comes to, let's say, relationships. One of the most important principles to follow in terms of relationships is that there should be no day that goes by if you're upset with someone except that you've tried to mend the relationship. It's a simple system, right? He's a friend of yours. He said something he shouldn't have said, or you did something you shouldn't have done. So what is the one thing that you can do? Make sure that before you go to sleep, water under the bridge. You've already initiated a conversation, right? Even if it means, hey, assalamu alaikum, we should really talk about what happened. That's it. That's all. But it's a principle that you live by, right? When it comes to the salah, the Prophet gave us a principle when it comes to the salah. He said every single time you get up for pray as if it's your last prayer. See what is he doing? He's giving us a principle. Now think about this. If you're really tired, one of those nights, and then you still haven't done your Isha, and you're really tired. Like you're so tired, even wudu seems like climbing Mount Everest right now. That's how tired you are, okay? but because it's a fard thing, you do it, what is the quality of the salah going to be? Do you think it's going to be like a high quality salah? You're going to really enjoy the salah? You're tired out of your mind. What did the Prophet say? He says, pray as if this is your last prayer. So when you now get up for this prayer, even though you're really tired, but in your head, this is the last prayer you're ever going to pray. After this is death. What's going to happen to this prayer, even though you're really tired? You're going to learn, you're going to find a way to optimize it. Why? Because the Prophet is going to give us a qaida on this. Right? Then mastery is a process and it's not an event. So understand that these principles, you're not going to be good at them. Public speaking is a very difficult task, and public speaking is something that is garnered and curated and fine-tuned over a course of many, many, many iterations. The first few iterations of public engagement are usually very crass, right? Most people embarrass themselves, right? There was a poll done by Stanford years ago that most people were more afraid of public speaking than of death. It's a really weird poll. Can you imagine? And obviously, one of the comedians at that time, he said that what that suggests is that most people would rather be in the grave than give the eulogy. You know? I want you to think about that. It is a very daunting task to get in front of hundreds of people and speak. It's not easy, and it takes time to develop. By the way, if you find it very easy, something's wrong. You shouldn't find it natural. Especially if you're representing the Prophet ﷺ, then every word that you say matters. It's a big deal, right? There has to be a sense of awe in this process. So let's get to it. Principle number 1. It says, don't be provocative. Be thought-provoking. This is something you should all memorize. If you're ever going to engage in dawah work, in Muslim advocacy, in Islamic representation, as a scholar, as a student of knowledge, as a da'i, you have to remember this as a principle. Our job is not to rile people up. This is not media, sensationalization. Choose a topic which really, really is going to get everyone fired up. No, you choose a topic which is going to be most beneficial. Big difference. Because your job is not to be provocative, keeping people on the edge. No, your job is supposed to be thought-provoking, which means every single person leaving your khutbah, as they're walking out, they're thinking to themselves, I should really change my life. I got to rethink this. My priorities are all over the place. Something that you should have said to them makes them want to be slightly different, transform towards the better. That's thought-provoking. You're engaging them. They're transformed. They can't be the same person as the person who entered the musalla as they're leaving the musalla. Right? So this is very important. Because you know what? When you speak in a thought-provoking manner, who's going to benefit? People. And when you're just being provocative, who's getting all the attention? You are. And by the way, that's a sickness that some of us have, where we will say the most provocative things because it'll garner attention. We'll say the silliest thing, or the thing that we know is going to, ruffle some feathers that perhaps are not, it's going to make people uncomfortable. We'll just say it because it sparks a discussion, and who's the center of this discussion? The ana, right? The ego is. So you have to be very careful about this. Don't make the khutbah about you. It's not a smart thing to do. Make the khutbah about the transformation of people into better human beings. Is that right? It's an act of service. Okay. The next, principle number 2, attain a high level of ilm. Okay, so remember, this is the principle. The mimbar is not for the juhal. The mimbar is not for the juhal. It's not for the people of ignorance. You don't have to be an alim to give a khutbah, but you must be a committed student of the sacred sciences. This is what's required. You don't have to be an alim to be an imam or a khateeb. You don't have to be a scholar, someone trained, someone with ijazat, and you don't need that. What you do need, though, is you need to have access to teachers. You need to be able to clarify things that you have researched and you have been studying. You need to be able to know that everything that you're saying is backed up by someone who actually knows how the system works, right? So you need to be able to confer your knowledge to someone else. so that they can discuss that with you and get to that conclusion, right? It is also very important that you're not someone who's completely ignorant about something you're talking about. You're not going to be a mujtahid in the issue, like the ultimate authority on that issue, but you also don't have to be completely vacuous about that issue either. So what does it mean to be a committed student? It doesn't mean to be full-time studying. It doesn't mean to be part-time. It means you're committed to learning, and you have access to teachers, and you have references and resources as to what you're saying. If you're saying something and you can reference and you can reference and provide resources, you're fine. But if you're saying something and someone after the khutbah comes to you and says, hey, so you said that thing, where did you get that from? You're like, well, that came to me last night. As I was pondering over this issue, this dawned on me. It's like, okay, great. Maybe you keep that to yourself and not sort of pontificate about religious matters with your community if you don't have that position in the community, right? Because in Islam, when you're ready, your teachers tell you you're ready. Like your teachers literally tell you, okay, I need you to be this person. I need you to teach this class. I need you to do this. The teachers will tell you, your teachers will tell you that you're now a teacher in the community, right? And if your teachers haven't done that, there's a reason, right? Like you need to marinate yourself a little bit more. You got to get a little bit more cooked. You're still in the oven. And if you take something out of the oven before it's fully cooked, it might not taste too well, okay? So you should keep that in mind, okay? You should just understand, this is a place of knowledge. The mimbar is a place of knowledge. So you should be in the pursuit of knowledge if you're going to be on the mimbar. Yes?
Could this preference be, like, a scholar on the internet?
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Perhaps it can be. We'll talk about that. Yes. Good question. Principle number 3, let the topic marinate, right? Which means there's no last minute prep for Jummah khutbahs. You're not doing it Thursday night, or worse, Friday morning, right? Don't do that, right? What does it mean? Let the topic marinate. You don't have to be a mujtahid, like an expert in the issue, but you must be someone who knows the basics of the issue quite well, okay? Prepare for the topic weeks in advance if possible, and speak only on those topics you have prepared well, right? This is important. Which means, if you haven't prepared for the khutbah and you're asked to give the khutbah, give an old khutbah. Don't do this like, I have 25 minutes, let me Google, ChatGPT, what is a good khutbah topic for today? Right? What's relevant to the Muslim community? It's like it gives you a list of them. Write me a 12-minute khutbah on this day. You can't, this is not the way that you are going to instill passion and transformation into people. Right? You might get a khutbah done, yes. It's way better that you do a khutbah that you've already given at this place before. The same khutbah, and it's beneficial for people because it's your khutbah, you're well prepped, you understand what the topic is, you understand where you're going and navigating in this topic. It's better to do that than to rehash a new khutbah in 25 minutes. Right? Is that what you're going to ask?
Yeah. Like what about the last minute, when we're
No, repeat the khutbah. Repeat the khutbah, and there's no shame in it. Right? Because in the dhikra, a reminder benefits the believers. Right? A reminder benefits the believer. Okay. Next one. Don't import someone else's khutbah. Okay? So this kind of goes to what the brother was asking. Unless you make your khutbah your own, you will lack the sincerity and passion that is required from you. Let me explain this. This does not mean that you can find inspiration from other ulama, your teachers, your scholars, people you look up to, people whose books you're reading, and they're passionate about something. It doesn't mean that you need to like reinvent the wheel and come up with your own topics and don't use anyone else's arguments or evidences or appeals. That's not what it means. What it means is that you have to take their khutbah and make it your own before you deliver it. You have to take that khutbah and make it, like if you're giving a khutbah on campus, you have to make it relevant to the campus audience. Right? You have to manipulate sometimes some words here or there so that it is more relevant and more profoundly effective to the community that you're speaking to. So copy-pasting khutbah is not a good idea. This is not a good idea, yes.
What about analogies, Ustad? Like if I hear a khutbah where a khateeb gives like a really nice analogy, I want
That's
to use
great.
that in my
Yeah,
life.
you can use it. Yeah, where would you instill that? That you have to think about. Where would you bring that? How would you do a lead up to that so that it's memorable for everybody? Right? Those things you have. That's what I mean. Make the khutbah your own. You can find inspiration. You can find content, arguments, emotional appeals. All of this from myriad sources, books, your own teachers, great khateebs online whose khutbahs get recorded from their masajids and get posted. All of that is great. But you have to make them personal. You have to personalize them. It has to have your own touch to it because then you'll be invested in the topic. And when you're invested in the content, everyone feels it. And this is the other thing. Who are you giving the khutbah to? What do you guys think? Who is the khutbah to? Community? Anybody else? Who's the first recipient of your khutbah? Your nafs. Yeah? The first recipient of your khutbah is your nafs. That's why you should find khutbahs that you need. Like it's islah for you. It's like, man, I'm being so bogged down lately with this, that. What's my major issue? All right, that's what I have to fix my nafs. So you give the khutbah to your nafs. To the point where, when I'm giving the khutbah, I literally say this. I say, this is a reminder to myself as an extension to everybody here. Meaning, you're not even important, people. Like, you're just accidental to this. This is me and my nafs. We need to fix things. You have an internal talk here. And can you tell me, what if you copy-pasted the khutbah now? You have personal advice to you. How can it be someone else's khutbah? You have to personalize it. And guess what happens? When you start doing that, people realize the sincerity. People realize, they sense the passion. Right? And that's what makes the khutbah powerful. Okay? The next thing is pursue language mastery. This is very important for a khateeb. Right? The Prophet said, "Inna min al-bayani la sihrun," which is most definitely in some forms of speech there's magic. What does he mean? Someone can speak and say something and it alters someone else's behavior. It alters someone else's perception. It alters someone else's intellect. By what? By just someone saying something. What does that mean? You guys, one of the most abandoned sunnahs and neglected sunnahs of our lifetime is the pursuit of the mastery of language. The Prophet ﷺ, right, the Sahaba said, "Afsahu lisanan minna." The Prophet ﷺ was the most eloquent in terms of his speech, in terms of his language, than all of us. He was the most eloquent of all of the companions. Everything he said, you wanted to write it in gold. He said few things, but the things he did say were very meaningful. There's not a lot of fluff in his speech. We have to learn that. And by the way, that's not even a khutbah thing. We have to learn that in life. So that when we go on khutbah, it comes naturally. Like in life, generally speaking, we shouldn't speak until what we have to say is very powerful and weighty and meaningful. It's not just speaking for the sake of speaking. And when we develop that as a habit, guess what happens? When we get on the mimbar and now we have to talk. We usually don't talk. And now we have to talk for 25 minutes. And you have to weigh your words carefully. And guess what? It's very refined. Everything that you're saying, someone is having an epiphany here. So, and then you said something else, someone had an epiphany there. And then you said something else, someone had an opening there. You said something else, someone had a futuhat over here. Right? People are going through these things. Why? Because you're just careful with what you're saying. You choose your words carefully. You just don't, blabber on. In real life, this is a transferable skill. Which means if you're like that as a person, you're going to be like that on the mimbar. But and as a person, you just ramble on. It's like you're just talking. Kalam faldi, this, that. That's all you're doing. Then what is going to happen on the mimbar? You're going to get into this thing and we're going on a tangent and you wouldn't know where you got there. Right? And I've seen this. I'm sure you've seen this. Right? Someone on the mimbar started talking about something and they went somewhere and now they don't know where to get back because they don't have a map. Like they don't know how to get back to the original thing. And there's like a brain freeze where you don't know what's going on and they don't know what's going on either. So it's better to learn the skill of choosing our words carefully. Another thing that's related to this is the way that we speak. You know how in Arabic there's tajweed? Like for the Quran, they have to recite the Quran a particular way. You can't just make it up. The accent of the Quran is a particular way. You can't just recite whatever you want, in whatever way you want. Even in the native languages that we speak, there is a level of carefulness in pronunciation. And back in the day, in the school curriculum, they would actually teach children enunciation techniques. Right? For example, a simple enunciation technique is to make sure the end of your words are properly pronounced. So end of your words are properly pronounced. The D has to be clear. The words S has to be clear. Just these things. What does this do? What does this do? What do you think this does? Like if you get your enunciation right, what does this do? Yes?
It makes it clear and forces you to actually like focus on every word rather than just mumbling.
So it's got dual benefit. Exactly. Very good. It's got dual benefit. I've asked this question. No one's ever gotten this right. It's got dual benefit. The first benefit is for the audience because it's clarity, right? And the second benefit is for you because it's got precision. So because you're enunciating everything very precisely, your thoughts are also very precise. Now you're going to say something, you're going to say what you mean and mean what you say, which is a rare thing, okay? Principle number 6, adopt the ordered chaos model, right? So this is very important. I can't stress how important this is. This is the absolute way that you tell someone's mastered public speaking. Because they follow this thing called the ordered chaos model. What is the ordered chaos model? The ordered chaos model works like this. Let's say I'm a comedian and I'm doing stand-up comedy tonight. Is there a local stand-up comedy thing here? Anyone know? Yeah. Is there one there locally? Oh, there's an Arab one locally. Okay, cool. So imagine, for some weird reason they've lost their mind and they invite me to do a 1-hour special comedy stand-up thing. Okay? Now, as a comedian, comedians do this all. Comedians do this, but many speakers do this because it works. What they do is that they prepare 100 jokes. So you've prepared 100 jokes now. In an hour, maximum the number of jokes you can tell, about 15 to 20 jokes. But how much have you prepared for? 100 of them. So that's the ordered part. You're very hyper prepared. And then you get to the comedy club, right? And then you start speaking. And do you have any notes in front of you? No. Do you ever see stand-up comedians have like a whole book? You ever see that? No, they don't do that. If they do that, they're not stand-up comedians. So how do they know which joke to say? How do they know what's the order of the 100 jokes? And out of those, how do they know out of those 100 jokes, which 15 are they going to select? How do they know that? They don't. Shouldn't they plan that out on the way there, maybe in the cab, maybe backstage? No. That's not how ordered chaos works. The way ordered chaos works is that you show up and then, based on how you feel, based on the lighting in the room, based on the audience response, you just freestyle. But is it freestyling if you've already prepared for 100 jokes? You see what that works? So let me give you an example. Let's say you're going to speak about shukr. Your khutbah is on shukr, gratitude. You have now prepared for 50 to 60 minutes lecture on gratitude. Your content is about 50 to 60 minutes worth of content on gratitude. You've practiced it, you've prepped it, and now you come to the Jummah khutbah, and the organizers say you have about 20 minutes. You're like, great. What are you going to say? You don't even know. You don't know. You're going to start to link things, speak verses, ahadith, explanations of scholars, poetry, relevancy to current audience. All of this stuff is just going to fit in its right place. It has to be practiced, but if you do this for many, many years, everyone is going to think that you meticulously planned for these khutbahs, and they don't realize that you don't even know what you're going to say next. You don't even know that. If they were to ask you, so what are you going to talk about? You're like, I actually don't know. But that doesn't mean you don't know. You hyper prepare. You prepared more than you should have prepared, which gives you the license to be completely free in how you're speaking. Which is what the audience benefits from, because they actually now go on you with the journey. You don't even know where you're going. It's an adventure. Right? You've got a topic, you've got raw data. How are you going to link the raw data to the topic? You don't even know. That's ordered chaos. Those are the best khutbahs that you ever give. And I guarantee you, those people that you look up to that give the best khutbah, sit with them and ask them how did they prep. They're going to give you some version of this. They might not know this is what they're doing, because they might not have studied this, so they might not know this is what they're doing, but that's what they're doing, right? Great ulama, all of their system is exactly the same. So prepare to such a degree that you are formidable and confident in the topic. Then let your personal state, your audience, your setting, the current zeitgeist dictate your khutbah, right? Then your khutbah becomes very powerful and very relevant. Okay, principle number 7. And I talked about this briefly, but know whose mimbar you are standing on. This is not your mimbar. This is not the MSA's mimbar. This is not Kitchener's mimbar. This is not Canada's mimbar. This is the mimbar of the Prophet ﷺ. All of us are the Na'ibul Khateeb, Na'ib Imam. We're replacement Imams. We're substitutes. We're not the official. We're not the real deal. And if it is your job to represent the Prophet ﷺ, that means that your khutbah better be at that level. Right? This allows you to prepare better because the pressure is on. It keeps you humble, knowing that you are a replacement. This majlis is not here for you. They're actually here to listen to the Prophet. He just couldn't make it, so that's you. Right? Like, can you imagine? I was just talking to the other khateebs because they reached out to me, Ustadh Daniel and Brother Qasim, who are giving the same presentation elsewhere. They were asking me for some advice, and mashallah, Brother Qasim even came to my workplace yesterday, and he was taking all these notes. He was a really humble guy, mashallah. And I was telling him that can you imagine the state of our city? The state of our city is so bad that when the MSA needed people to teach other people how to give khutbahs, they reached out to you and me. That just shows how mediocre ilm is in our city. That people like me are supposed to be talking to people like you about being great. And I know who I am, right? Because I know great people. And I know I'm not one of them because I actually personally know them. And I lived with them. And I served them. And I benefited from them. And so me knowing this just tells you that we're not in a good place. Right? Something for all of us to think about. That's why if you ever end up on a mimbar one day, ask yourself, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for islah of your community. Because you know your sins, you know your deficiencies, you know your weaknesses, and knowing all of that, you know where you're standing. And you know that you don't deserve to stand here. Like from a spiritual perspective, maybe from ilm, yes, maybe you're the most knowledgeable person in your group, but from a spiritual perspective, you know how far you are from being a wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from being from the righteous. And we all know this about ourselves. So if you find yourself on the mimbar, you should be in shock, right? You'd be like, I deserve to be here. No, you feel like, who put me here? Like, do you not know who I am? Right? That's why when someone invites me to like these events from a different city, like in my city, I don't mind serving. But when someone invites me to a different city, I'm like, don't you have like local actual scholars? And they say, no, Ustadh, we really want you to come. I'm like, dude, I am good from far, but far from good. Right? Do you not understand how this works? But it's just the reality of the time that we're in. So what else happens? It forces you to be on prophetic character. It forces you to be on prophetic character. And yes?
Ustad, along that kind of sentiment, should you still then kind of pursue these roles of like serving the community and being like,
Yeah,
it
good
almost
question.
feels a bit hypocritical.
Yes. Okay, it's called imposter syndrome. It's a good thing to have. Okay, so let me summarize this. This is really important, what Uzair is saying. You know what happens? Sometimes you're in a room or you're in a chair and you're looking around and it's like, oh my God, I'm the wrong person for this. These guys actually think I know something. Or they think that I have some level of iman, high iman, or some religiosity. And it really bothers you because we know who we are. So in that moment, we feel like an imposter. Right? So one of the students of Abu Hurairah, he has a solution for this. And he says, what you do is you take that guilt and you use that to motivate yourself to be like someone who deserves to sit there. That's the solution. You know, like I know for a fact I shouldn't be standing up here, right? Okay, but do I know the characteristics of those people who do deserve to stand up there? Yeah, they're my teachers, some of them, right, that I look up to. Okay, so I need to be like those people so that one day maybe I actually deserve to be there. Do you understand how that works? It's very important to understand that. By the way, you should have imposter syndrome. That's why, it was awkward. Like I was in the UK, and then people were introducing me, as someone who did this and finished that and studied with this and I was sitting there, I'm like, I don't know who they're describing, right? I don't know who that person is. It's not me. That sounds, because that's all you, like, if that's all you see, and you don't see any of the sins, you know, does someone call someone up on stage to speak? It's like, this person missed 13 prayers last month, you know, and this person backbit on Wednesday. Put your hands together for such a, is this ever going to be happening? No, because people don't know your reality. Like Abu Yusuf, the student of Abu Hanifa, he said that if all of you students, if you knew, if my sins had a smell, then there would be no one sitting in front of me. He's saying this as a qadi, like he's the head judge, right? He gets rulings on masail. That's what he does. He's the head judge. And he's teaching a class and he's just looking around and he sees all these brilliant top scholars of that time sitting in front of him. And he says to them, if my sins had a smell, then it'd be so odious that none of you would be sitting here. Right? He's having imposter syndrome. You guys, the great student of Abu Hanifa, the Qadi of Kufa, he's having imposter syndrome. But that's Iman. You should feel like that. You should feel like you don't deserve any of this stuff, because we don't. So what's the remedy? The remedy is to adopt prophetic character so that at least you're close to being someone who deserves that maqam, knowing that you're not. Yes?
So I can see that fitting for you find yourself in a position where you don't deserve. But what about actually pursuing, wanting to be is that hypocritical, or is that
Oh, good question. So someone who pursues, let's say, knowledge or executive positions in the MSA so that they are called upon leadership. Yeah, no, that's not the niyyah that you should have, right? So this is not what you should do. What you should do is that be ready to be called on. So you're not the one vying to be the khateeb, to be in positions of leadership. You're doing the most amount of service. And due to your service, people are saying, hey, you need to be in this position of leadership, right? The only exception that we have there's one exception. So I'm going to give you the general rule. The general rule is you don't vie for leadership, right? It's only the corrupt that are pulled into situations of power. Yes? And that's why the Prophet taught us, Sayyidul Qawmi Khadimuhum. The leader of a group of people is their servant. You seek service. Like, I want to get into this because I want to serve people. Now, when it comes to a particular position of service in which there is leadership, it's people who thrust that upon you. The only exception is that if you don't volunteer to take on this position, there's going to be corruption. Like, for example, there's salah time happening and it's maghrib salah, so it's out, like it's jahran, right? It's audible salah. And there's 6 people and 5 of them have not studied tajweed, and you have. You don't play the humble card here now. You say, no, yeah, you please lead. No, like, you don't. They haven't studied tajweed. The salah is going to be affected because it's not going to be recited well. So in this case, you volunteer yourself. Why? Because there's going to be fasad if you don't. Like Yusuf a.s. volunteering to be the treasurer of Egypt in a time of famine. Why? Because he was in the governor's house, remember? He knows the corruption of Egypt. He knows that this people are going to abuse this position, and therefore he didn't say, make me this or make me that. No, make me khaza'in al-ard, ala khaza'in al-ard. He says, put me in charge of the treasury of Egypt. He specifically put that claim. Why? Because that's the position that if someone rightful and righteous is not there, there's going to be death, there's going to be greed, there's going to be oppression, right? So in cases when you know that this is the case, then you volunteer for leadership. Otherwise, you don't volunteer for leadership, right? That's why, what's the best place to be in the masjid? Not the imam's mimbar. That's a position of responsibility. Why do you want to be there? Everywhere else is safer, right? So you want to be everyone else but there. But if you're called on to that, and if you're signed up for this and you say, look, there's a problem on the mimbars, we need people on backup, we need people, sometimes people get sick, we need to call in people, sometimes people get stuck in traffic, right? If you're coming from Toronto or something here, it happened to me like more than once. I'm coming here and then the 401's jammed. What are you going to do? I have to let the MSA know, hey, you guys figure something out. And alhamdulillah, they have backup people, right? So when you're called upon leadership, then you take it on, right? But let your community, let your peers, let other people call you on instead of you saying, I need to do this. Last couple of maxims or principles. Principle number 8, don't seek prestige. Oh, this goes to exactly what you were asking. The worst to be given leadership are those that seek it out, right? Power corrupts in all cases. You just assume that, especially for your nafs. Lead because you are the most formidable to do so. You're the most knowledgeable. You're the most articulate. You're the one with the most high virtue and character. So people around you tell you, no, you need to be in a position of leadership, right? And others should want you up there more than you want to be up there. And one of the riwayat in Abu Dawud on the Mahdi is exactly that. You know, people are going to find the Mahdi and they're going to go to him, it's like, hey, you need to lead us. And he's going to refuse. They say, no, I'm okay. He didn't want to do it. And then people will keep pressing him until he has to cave in and do it, right? So this is from the rights of leadership. Just interesting, Suyuti says that the Mahdi, the Prophet said, is going to be from the lineage of Sayyidina Hassan, which is interesting, isn't it? Because he says that Hassan radiallahu anhu, for the sake of unity of the ummah, gave up all power. He transferred the power over, the khilafah over to Muawiyah radiallahu anhu, because he wanted to unite the ummah. Yeah? And therefore, from his lineage, there's going to be someone who's going to again reunite the ummah by taking on the power. Right? He gave up the power to reunite the ummah, and then from his lineage, he's going to have a child who's going to now take on power to unite the ummah. Principle number 9, choose topics wisely. Ensure that they are beneficial to all. So we talked about the principle before, don't be provocative, be thought-provoking. This applies to your topics as well. Okay? So something which is a delicate matter, you don't discuss that openly, especially if you're supposed to be discussing that with a particular group, because it only applies to a particular group. If you're talking about a topic which only affects the brothers, this is not a good topic, because there's sisters in your audience as well. If you're talking about a topic which right now has a big ikhtilaf, like the scholars are on splits on it, you don't take one position and just represent that one position in that topic, right? What you can do is teach people the adab of living with ikhtilafat, right? If there's a political issue, right, and the ummah is not on one side on it, then you have to be very careful, right? If there's something that could ruffle feathers in a way that someone is not going to now be connected to Allah, because of your topic, they're driven further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You should be careful. This is what happens when you rant at people and you make people feel horrible about themselves. You're not supposed to do that. Okay? The next one, don't represent a particular gender or madhab or creed. Doesn't matter what gender that you belong to, especially if you're giving a khutbah, you're male. It can't be a male-centered khutbah. It just can't be, because there are women in the audience, right? You're ostracizing some key members who are in attendance to your khutbah. Likewise, your madhab. It doesn't matter which madhab you belong to. You can't give a madhab-centric khutbah, right? So for example, in one place, if you're going to give a talk on the virtues of Abu Hanifa, the next Friday you better give the talk on the virtues of Malik. And what you can learn, what everyone can learn from the life of Malik, and then from the life of Imam Shafi'i, from the life of Imam Ahmad, right? It's important. Be plugged into the community and know the needs of the masses. Like what you're talking about needs to be something that is reflective of the reality of the people in front of you. I can't go and talk about financial issues for people who are not earning yet. What I can talk about is the importance of zakat and the importance of being wealthy, so that zakat is something that you can do, and sadaqah is a door that you can enter into Jannah through. I can do that because it's aspirational. But what I can't do is talk about what is the best thing to invest your money in, where is the best khair in terms of investments, which country is going to benefit most from your investment, which country is doing best for the Muslims, that's why you should invest in them. Because it's relevant. I'm talking to people who haven't made money yet, who don't have money to invest yet. On a campus, this is not the case. So you have to be extra careful as to the relevancy of your topic. And this is also important, like there's something outside the musalla, there's something everyone's talking about. For example, when we were talking about the last MIMC conference, and they were talking about which topics would be best, and they conferred with me, I really liked the whole masculinity topic. The reason why is because at that time last year, I don't know if you guys remember or not, everyone online was talking about toxic masculinity and the Andrew Tate version of masculinity and his conversion to Islam and what that meant and what that brought, and young people's response to that level of masculinity. It was like, look, people need to know the prophetic masculinity. It's very important for them to know what's futuwa, what's rujula, what's muruwa. It's important, right? So it's relevant. You have to be relevant. That's the idea. Be plugged into the community and know the needs of the community. Finally, talk to people, not at them. Talk to people, not at them. It's not a rant session. Know that you are the worst person in the prayer. By the way, this is objectively the truth, right? Like in this room, not subjectively, objectively it is truth. It's a truth statement that I'm the worst person in this room. Objectively, right? Yes, objectively. Why? Because I don't know anyone's sins here, but I do know my sins. I don't know anyone's weaknesses here, right? For some of you, I know a couple, right? But I know my weaknesses, right? And I don't know about anyone else's personal worship here and how much personal worship you do, but I know my personal worship. So objectively speaking, actually, this is a statement of fact that I am the worst person in this room. And if I feel otherwise, I'm not being sincere to my nafs. So if that's the case in this room, any room is the same case. Any room where there's other believers, you assume that they are better than you. Right? You just assume that. And if that's the case, then as an imam, do I get to talk down to people knowing that they're better than me? Have you ever had that? Someone who is worse off saying to someone who's better off, you got to get your act together. That make any sense? Like, this person has a better act together than I have, right? It wouldn't make any sense. Yelling at people doesn't lead to transformation. Penetrating their hearts does. That's why the Jummah khutbah is a pursuit of winning people's hearts. It is not a matter of yelling at people. That doesn't mean you can't raise your voice. That doesn't mean you can't be passionate. You know, sometimes the Prophet would give a khutbah and you could hear him into the marketplaces, into the streets in Medina. Was he yelling at people? No. He was trying to drive a point home. He was penetrating their hearts. He was sometimes you have to do the shock and awe syndrome. But that's you yelling at your nafs. It's not about people. Right? Yes, sir.
I had a case where one of the schools that I went to, he was driving a point. He was very, directed, which I felt like it was personally, at least it didn't work for me.
Oh, yes, it does. Absolutely. So this is why, yeah, he brought passion to the table. He made an emotional appeal.
I felt like it was just, like he brought up most, he said most people do X, Y, Z. I felt like I was part of that group.
Yes.
Based off of that, it drove that point deeper.
Yes.
But it was more.
So let me give you an example of both in the same sequence. So if I'm talking to you and I say to you, you guys have a problem. And that problem is, no matter what is happening, no matter which gathering you're in, you always have a phone in your hand. This is a problem. We need to fix this. The Prophet ﷺ would look at people when he was talking to them. When he would talk to someone on the right side, he would put his shoulders to them. He wouldn't just move his neck. And what are we doing? Right? We're not even looking up to people. Forget our shoulders. We're not even looking up to people. And I can say all of this by saying you, versus we, brothers and sisters, have a problem. Just that you versus the we changes the scenario. It now becomes a conversation to my nafs. It's not about you. We have this issue. We need to fix this. Right? And then just people should know that you're not angry at them, but you're angry at the situation. Like love should emanate from you. They should know that you're passionate because of concern, not because of animosity. And that's the difference. When you yell at people, you're angry at them. Right? But when you're giving them a wa'adh, you're trying to penetrate their hearts, you do it out of concern for people. And that's what the Prophet was doing. Out of his concern for people, he would raise his voice. He would get red. There was a little vein that would pop on his forehead. It would like pop up. That's how they know the Prophet was very serious right now. So he had physical manifestations of seriousness and passion and appeal. And it's important to have emotional appeal. And how can you have emotional appeal if you don't fluctuate your voice? If you don't raise your voice? Right? Yes? So you can't have like 25 minutes of seriousness in the khutbah, right? You should have a crescendo, right? You should have a crescendo. So logical arguments, relevancy, and then the emotional appeal, right? So you should do that. Did you just something happened? What happened with your phone?
Oh, I have like an option where it's
Oh, okay, that's cool. He just lit up. So yeah, so you build up to your khutbah. We'll talk about that after Asr when I'm giving you your formatting. So we'll talk about that. But that's a good point. Okay, alhamdulillah. So we've come to a close for this. The topics and everything we'll do after Asr, inshallah ta'ala, where you guys actually do your workshop stuff. Yes.
One question is before we break this that.
Yes.
So you give a lot of like good principles and things that we should aspire to become the best versions of khateebs we can. But obviously it's like a process to get there. And how do we kind of balance holding, like personally and as an MSA, like holding our khateebs to a high standard, but also knowing that like we have like courses and stuff that we need to study for, and we might not get all the time to prepare our khutbahs, and we also have a shortage of khateebs.
Yes.
So if we say to someone, you're not ready, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yes.
So we gotta go find someone else.
Yes.
So how do we find that balance of bringing up people, but also making sure like...
How many khutbahs are happening on campus every Jumu'ah?
Sorry?
How many khutbahs in total?
3.
3 in one location or throughout the campus?
2 locations.
In 2 locations, 3 khutbahs.
Yes.
Okay. So you on a given Friday need 3 khateebs.
Yes.
Okay. And what I'm going to suggest to the MSA, which is basically giving them homework, you might not like me much about that, but you pick a day of the week where there's new khateebs coming in the pipeline, have their mock khutbahs. Right? And a couple of people from the MSA who've been doing khutbahs for a while, they be their mentors. So like on a Tuesday night for half an hour is khutbah mentorship spot. So you have like, these are 6 khateebs that we have put in the pipeline. In the future terms, they're going to be our khateebs. So they're going through their mock trainings on a particular day. So they're engaged. And if you need them, when the mentors say, I think this guy is ready, then you can plug them into this thing. But there has to be a system in place. The first time someone's giving a khutbah should not be the official khutbah for the community. Right? There's these mock khutbahs that they've been trained to give, that they're giving all the time, they're getting into it, and then you transition them into this. Right? But you're right, you don't also want to shoot yourself in the foot and just say no to people who are starting their journey. No, they should have an avenue, a platform by which they are getting into their whole khutbah. They should feel part of the team, even if they're not on the mimbar. They should feel, we're like the 12 people or the 8 people this term who are going to be on the khutbah team, but we're just on the bench. And perhaps next year we're going to be on the starting lineup, but we're on the bench now. Right? I hope that helps.
Jazakallah khair.
Okay, barakallah feek. Inshallah, we'll stop here. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. And I always tell people, the people who get completely rocked by criticisms and by all their mistakes, they, generally speaking, turn out to be the best students. Because they're willing to put themselves out there, try something, and get feedback. And as long as you create what's called psychological safety. The MSA needs to talk about psychological safety, by the way, because I went to a seminar, it was for educational development, and I found that a lot of the principles that those psychological safety people were using, the Prophet was doing that with the Sahaba. Which is, for example, if you give a suggestion and it's really out there, do you fear losing respect? And if it's a psychologically safe space, then you don't fear losing respect. You don't fear being judged harshly, right? Part of psychological safety development is building trust. So what happens, I know this is not enough for us because we're just, 2 hours together, but this should be a space where this is grounds for you to make mistakes. You'd rather make those mistakes here than on the mimbar. That should be our attitude, right? And so if what the MSA should do, if possible, is to set up mock khutbah days where new khateebs who haven't given a lot of khutbahs can come and give khutbahs to seasoned khateebs and just hear their feedback. It's the best thing. It's like, can you imagine someone going to play professional sport and they've gotten to know training days and practices? You'd be like, no, that's not possible. Because once you make the team, you have to then attend practices before the season starts, right? Okay, so before the actual khutbah, you have to do iterations of practice. The khutbah can't be the warm-up. It can't be the practice ground because now there's like 40, 50, 500, 200 people that are just a victim to you trying to figure this thing out, right? So training wheels. The training wheels could be during the week where people are coming in. There's a bunch of senior khateebs who've been giving khutbahs for a while, and they just say, look, I would have said this differently, or you're missing this point. Or every time you end a khutbah, give at least a actionable item. You forgot your actionable item, right? Or mention the reference. If you're going to quote a hadith, at least mention that it's, from which reference book it is. Or for someone, if you quote a verse, at least mention the surah name so people can go find it later, right? So this can happen, inshallah. Let's get into a very important aspect of the khutbah component, which is selecting the right topic. So, you could be a great speaker. You could be a very pious person. You could be knowledgeable. But if you get this step wrong, right, it could be bad. It could be bad to the point where you can get cancelled. And I mean for the right reasons. Not for some like woke liberal agenda stuff, but you can get cancelled for the right reasons. What do I mean? So raise your hand. You know what's easy? It's easy to talk about what you should not do. So can I ask you guys, raise your hand, what's a bad topic? And we're talking specifically university audience, like think SLC khutbah. First khutbah at SLC. What do you think is a bad topic? Yes, sir. How to be a good parent? Because it's irrelevant. Yes, good, excellent. So that's not necessarily a bad topic, it's just anachronistic. It's not the right time for it. But yes, you're right.
How to wear the hijab properly?
How to like do a hijab demonstration? Yes, that would be really weird. Yes.
My madhab is the only correct one.
My madhab is the correct madhab, right? And the proofs for this. Yes. Sufis versus Salafis. So sectarian differences. The khutbah is a place of unity. It's not a place where you fan in the flames of disunity. Excellent. What else? Controversial topics, you guys, Mawlid. Right? Can we celebrate the birthday of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? You want to talk about that? Let's say you want to talk about that. What do you talk about? Loving the Prophet is part of Iman. Okay? And then give a khutbah of how the Sahaba loved the Prophet. Nobody knows what your position is. But everyone is going to now leave the room loving the Prophet a little bit more and wanting to do something for him. And that's something you didn't touch on. Because that could be the murky waters. Right? Excellent. Good point. What else? Come on, you guys, think about this. Oh, very good. What about the Shia? The Shia. What does that mean? Yeah, unless there's an issue going on. You're right. Uncalled for. Like nothing's happening. Everyone's like, it's like, and then you have a rant session on the Shias. Yes?
Any topic pertaining to political differences?
Very good. Very good. Anything that is not affecting the Muslim Ummah directly and it's some political thing that's going on. Like, this is why you should vote NDP. Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anything else? Yes. Very good. Thank you. This is what I was looking for. Many khateebs, mashallah, a lot of you have mashayikh that you're studying with. And in durus, in their classes, because they deem you as a student, you're talking about certain masail that are in the kutub. They're in the books. There's certain topics that are there for ilmi rujhanat, people with proclivities towards knowledge. They're discussing these things. They don't belong on the mimbar. These are the nuances and intricacies of religious discourse, academic discourse. That's why if you're a khateeb and you are using a lot of Arabic terminology in a university setting, what is this? This is not appropriate. You should translate everything. If possible, even the hadith. If you don't want to say the whole hadith out, the snippet that's important, at least translate that into English. Right? So don't bring your study baggage into the mimbar. As a student, you're excited about some things. Some people are really into law. Some people are really into theology. Some people are really into language. Some people are really into this or that, the other. And you enjoy these things as a student. As a khateeb, it's not about what you enjoy. It's about what people need. You don't bring classroom discussions on the mimbar. It's not beneficial. Right? You'll sound smart and then your ego is going to be exasperated. All it's going to do is someone's going to say, like, mashallah, I didn't know you know so much, mashallah. And then you're going to feel great about yourself. It's for your ego. No khutbah should be for your ego. It's actually to put your ego down, right? The point of the khutbah is to do tahdeeb of the nafs. It's to discipline the nafs. It's not to inflame the ego, right? So, here are khutbahs that you should be talking about. Okay, that will be really beneficial for the community. The first one, general refinement issues. What does that mean? The general refinements are things that you see in the community that are happening, that you've discussed with people, and we want to fix these things. These are Islahi khutubat. There's a really good book, it's like a 6-volume book that some of the students, Mufti Taqi Usmani, in his nightly durus in Karachi, at the main masjid, he would give these talks to the community. This guy is the Grand Mufti of Pakistan. He's a big deal. But in the evenings, he would give like this general halaqa talk, no ilmi discussions, nothing. It's just like, this is what we all need to do and we should do this. Someone sat there and then recorded that for 23 years. They literally wrote it down, every single thing. And then they got it ready. They showed him the manuscripts, like, you like this? He's like, I love this. And then they printed it in 6 volumes. Right? What you find in those is that he's talking about how do you stay humble? How do you rectify your tongue and speak well? Right? How do you serve your elderly parents? How do you develop strong bonds between brothers and sisters? Right? Why is cleanliness so important in the deen? Right? Why is hygiene such a big deal? What are practical ways of serving people who will not ask to be served? These are really important things that we should all learn. This is actually how you get into Jannah. Yeah, these are the things that if you do them, you fall into the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's all the khutbahs are. So for us, we pick a topic, we think, what is something that a lot of people need a reminder for that they're just ignoring? One of the first khutbahs I do on campuses, and by the way, for me, majority of my khutbahs are from this category. And if you've attended my khutbahs, you know this, right? I'll talk about the importance of Assalamu alaikum and what does salam truly mean, right? I'll talk about the virtue of ithar, which is the preferring other people over yourself, right? Because these are things I need to remind myself of all the time, right? And so these make some of the most simple, some of the most powerful khutbahs. How do you make such a simple thing, Assalamu alaikum? How do you make this powerful? Your rhetoric, your oration, the narrations that you're bringing in, the connections you're making, the relevancy of the arguments, that's how you do it. The topic doesn't have to be, please write this down. Everybody should write this down, right? Not everything simple is mundane, right? Not everything simple is mundane. Our mantra should be simple yet profound. That's what your khutbahs are supposed to be. Simple as in anyone can understand it. But profound, that if there's a scholar of scholars sitting in front of you, they'd be like, that's well properly said, it's well said. Like, it's so simple to say Assalamu alaikum is important. Isn't that simple? Everyone, you should say Assalamu alaikum. Initiate the salam. Man bada'a bis-salam bari'un min al-kibr. This is easy. Whoever initiates the salam is free from arrogance. Beautiful, great. How do you make this profound? That's your job. How do you make this powerful? That's your job as a khateeb. But you don't choose like a profound topic. The topic has to be simple. The discourse has to be profound. If the topic is profound, you've already ostracized majority of your audience. Because majority of your audience is not ilmi. They're not kitabi. They're not sitting in halaqat. They just want to refine their lives. And they want to love Allah and His Messenger. And that's supposed to be your job. But you chose some complicated topic. Right? Simple yet profound. That's our mantra. Remember that. Okay. Next, neglected practices. Something which is a virtue in Islam. Something which is a sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Something which the saqafa of Islam, the cultural inheritance of Islam is promoting for many years, and now we're abandoning it. Can you think of something like that? Can anyone think of something that would have been mainstream, would have been the essence of it, and then we're sort of extremely far away from it? Yes? The dental hygiene, very good. The siwak. Right, excellent. Yes?
Just general.
Oh, exactly. Very good. Excellent. What else? It would have been common. Hosting. You guys hosting. Do you guys remember? If I'm wrong, please correct me. Do you remember growing up when you were younger, before COVID, people would invite other people and host them. I'm not talking about people would invite an entire group of people, like 30, 40 people, and do this mega like event, like dinner, and then you've invited everyone off your list. I'm talking about you invite this one family, and then you host them and you honor them and you make some special food for them and you speak to them and you bond with them. Do you remember that? And then eventually, as our culture moves forward, we've gone away from that model, and now when someone wants to host someone, they host like an entire group of people together. It's like 30 people at once and 20, and then you don't actually connect with any one of those people, to be honest, because it's like a slew of people, right? COVID actually made us into a segmented group of people, and people are still not back to normal yet, right? In norms and things like that, people are still not connecting the way they were connecting before COVID. I don't know if you want to really think about this. This is actually the case. Hosting is a very beautiful Islamic practice. To be very generous hosts, to invite people, to serve people, to feed people. But the entire culture now is very different. It's like we're going to really host someone, we'll take them out. We'll take them out to this mutual place and we'll just all eat there and then return back. But like opening your homes for people, inviting them into your inner chambers, serving them, talking to them, bonding with them. This is from the culture of Islam. Ask your parents, that's how they grew up. Ask all your parents. That's exactly how all of your parents grew up. But it's a different culture. We don't do that. This is from the Saqafa Islam, being a good host. What about visiting sick people? How many people here have visited a hospital recently just for the sake of visiting a sick person? Yes. And was it someone close to you? Yes. It is like that, right? Now, there's a brother, I love this guy. What he did was we used to be in Brampton, at the local cemetery there, he is the guy who informs the entire Muslim community when the janazah prayers are, every single day. If there's a janazah that day, you can just check the group. If you're in the area, you can attend the janazah, you can follow the burial to the cemetery. So if you're ever in Brampton, just message me. I'll tell you if there is a janazah today, which masjid is going to be, where they're taking the body to be buried, because that's the service he's doing for everybody. That's what he does. That's that guy. Everyone in the community knows him because he does this. He connects with all the local masjids every morning, finds out if there's a janazah scheduled that day, puts it in the group, tells you where the guy is being buried. And a lot of the Muslims, this is a sunnah, that the right of a believer upon you is that you take them to the janazah. Right? You take them to the burial. And you lower them into their graves. It's very spiritual to do that. Right? For people, like especially people who are looking for a spiritual high, do that for like a week or two. Just bury people. And then 90% of your problems go away. Right? It's like you come home and you open the fridge, there's no orange juice. You're like, astaghfirullah. Right? Where's the orange juice? You don't do stuff like that when you just buried someone who lost their life at 22. Right? Because you're like, there's bigger things in this dunya than orange juice at your will. Right? So these type of neglected practices, if you notice them, you highlight them, and you revive the sunan of the Prophet ﷺ, or the virtues that the Prophet ﷺ was instilling in the community. Okay. Next one is reflections on verses and narrations, connecting people to the Quran and connecting people to the Prophet ﷺ sunnah, to his hadith. Right? So pick a verse. It's a really powerful verse. You've been affected by it. It's general enough and not nuanced that you can share this with people. And say, okay, we're going to study this particular verse today. The whole khutbah is this verse. And you repeat the verse often. You talk about what the commentator is saying on it. You talk about how do you apply this verse. That's it. Today we're going to talk about this one hadith. The whole 20 minutes I'm going to talk about this hadith, how you can implement this hadith, how you can act on this hadith, and hopefully encourage people to live that hadith in their lives. Very simple topic. You could barely get this wrong. It's very difficult to get this wrong. Because there's not a lot of opinion involved. There's just you reading the verse, studying what the verse is saying by the mufassirun and by the scholars, connecting with your teachers, approving, getting your approval, and then laying it out there. It's very simple to do this. And of course, choose the right verse. So, for example, which verse should you not be choosing for a general Jummah khutbah? Yes? Yeah. Actually, to be honest, in all honesty, that's one of the verses you should be choosing. Yes? Yeah, exactly. Anything that is going to get you bad, right? And then you should be very careful about. So the brother mentioned the verse of the punishment for adultery. And I said that's actually a verse that you should be choosing. Why? I would actually put that in category number 2. Because this is something important to the Sharia. The sanctity of the family, extramarital affairs, the consequences of that on children, the consequences of that on divorces. But the way that you express it, you have to be careful. So it's not that you ignore that verse, but the way that you're going to express that verse. What jiha, what aspect of that verse are you going to narrate to your community is important, right? If the hudud is the thing that you're highlighting, that might be a problem, right? But if you're highlighting the fact that extramarital affairs break families, rip families apart, destroy children, give trauma to children, these things, that's very valid. You can do that. That's good. Yes? Yeah, so exactly. If your whole khutbah, actually, to be honest, I've actually given a khutbah on that verse. Okay? So, the verse in Surah Al-Baqarah about menstruation, right? But it wasn't at the MSA, at the masjid. Okay? However, let me tell you something. The way that Allah speaks in that verse about menstruation is absolutely mind-blowing. It's such an important thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's response to when people ask you about the menstruating lady, His response is that it is a difficult time. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. You know what that sets the tone for? This is why the Sharia is relaxed for the women during that time. You know what that also means? That means this is what our interactions with women should be relaxed during that time. Because if Allah is relaxing His Sharia, right, then are you going to have higher standards than God? Do you know how powerful that is? Right? Like sisters always feel that during their cycle, they're unable to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I always tell them, by not worshiping Allah, you're obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the one thing, but if you don't do anything, you're getting rewarded. Like if you don't pray, you get rewarded for not praying. Do you understand how powerful that is? Right? Like if you don't do things that you're supposed to do in regular times, you're getting rewarded for it. This is superpower. Anyways. So, reflections on narrations and verses. Yes?
Well, I do have, like, even from the thing that I just mentioned, I understand that if I bring it up, as you kind of mentioned in the middle of football,
Yeah.
I get slapped by the end of it. But it is a hadith. Like,
It is.
a good message and it has some. So I assume that given certain.
Yes. This is my point to both of the brothers as well. It's like, it's not the avoidance of the topic. It is how you frame it. Because it is wisdom. You know, if it's authentically from the Prophet ﷺ in terms of hadith, and if Quran obviously is tawatur, so we don't have to check anything. But if it's a hadith and if it's authentic, we shouldn't shy away from it. There probably is the right, proper way of addressing this. And part of your khutbah is to create that context by which you can bring the hadith and it actually provides wisdom. Right? Yeah. Okay, and finally, the last one is nuanced understanding of fundamental concepts. So something very simple, but you provide a more robust understanding for it. For example, sadaqah. Right? So sadaqah is not general refinement, is not neglected practice, it's not reflection on verses and narrations, but it's a very simple concept. You should give in charity. But now your job is to take this very simple concept and make it so profound and powerful that people leave saying, I'm going to go into Jannah through the doors of sadaqah. That's your job. Right? Like fasting. It's a simple thing. It's a simple act of worship. Everyone knows what fasting is. But are you able to instill a love of fasting into people to such a degree that they start fasting even outside of Ramadan? Right? This is what that category is. Nuanced understanding of fundamental concepts, like Tawheed. You know, everyone's like, oh, Tawheed is simple. Yeah, it is. You know how profound it can be? How powerful it can be? There are layers to it. There's aspects to Tawheed that are absolutely philosophical and mind-blowing and really powerful and force someone to rethink their entire existence. Right? So that's that. These are topics that you should venture into. After mentioning the topics we shouldn't do, these are the topics that we should venture into. It's always good to have a khutbah buddy, a khutbah mentor. Someone that you touch base with at the beginning of the week and say, here, I'm going to be giving this khutbah. Anything to add, anything, that's just a khutbah mentor, right? A transcript of your khutbah, a recording of your khutbah, someone who will give you the time. Usually it's a local teacher of yours or an elder in terms of knowledge that you can confer with, but someone should be there, right? You should not be independent, right? Okay, now what I want to do, are there any questions on the topic stuff? Okay, excellent. So with the little time that we have, I want to do an exercise. There are 5 fundamental things of a khutbah. Obviously, there is the khutbah al-hajah, which is the thing that is done at the beginning, which is usually recited in the Arabic language, although there's an ikhtilaf whether it's permissible to do it in English or not. But generally speaking, it's recited in the Arabic language. After that, there is now the content of the khutbah. It's divided into 5 categories. So I'm going to write it out. I'm going to give you guys your groups, inshallah. I'm going to try and practically implement this. Okay. So the first aspect of it is the hook. Very much like a speech. So this here is not even from Islamic sources. This is active, public speaking formatting. So there's a hook, okay? There is the logical appeal. There's the emotional appeal. There's relevancy. So how do you connect this topic to your audience directly? And there is a memorable conclusion. So this is basically the main format of any khutbah. Any major khutbah, even the khutbahs you love, by the way, if you get to the bare bones, and you will actually be able to put things into these boxes. Everything. I guarantee you, try to do this with any good lecture. Not even a Jummah khutbah, any good talk, any good speech, any good khatara. It goes into these categories. So what do we mean by hook? Right? Hook is the first part of your discussion. Hook can be shock and awe. So what does shock and awe mean? You go out there and you give someone a statistic, like a harrowing statistic, like they wouldn't think about this, right? Does anyone know a really shock and awe type statistic? Yes. Divorce rate. Excellent. Anybody else? Very good. Yeah, it's close to about 45%. Very good. Yeah, almost half of the Muslims who actually accept Islam end up leaving Islam in the first 2 to 3 years. This is true. Very good. Excellent. Yes. Very good. So the idea of how much religiosity is actually in the community. You guys, what about the statistics on mental health? Right? Statistics on social media addiction, right? Or substance abuse, right? Or statistics on particular actions that are very prevalent in society. Yes? Okay. Any others? Yes. Suicide rates. Very good. Yeah, amongst believers. Absolutely. So shock and awe. Yes.
Like a hadith that says something that you don't expect.
Very good. Exactly. Very good. So I have a khutbah that I've done at Waterloo as well, done at other places, where I say everyone must have heard the hadith of the strong believer is more beloved to Allah and better than the weak believer, and there's good in both. And I see like people in like their minds they're nodding, and from their eyes they're nodding, and some people are actually nodding, right? And then I say, but very few of us know the rest of the hadith on how to become strong. It's the same hadith. First part of it says the strong believer is more beloved to Allah and better than the weak believer, and there's khair in both. And then the Prophet actually tells us how to be a strong believer. And then I say to people, very few of us actually know the second part of the hadith. Yes? Yes.
What is the second part?
Okay, yeah, this is the point. Yeah, because everyone sitting down should be thinking, how do I become the, because he says, ihris إلى من ينفعك واستعن بالله لا تعجز ولا تقل لو أني كذا وكذا, right? So basically he says, number one, be covetous over that which is beneficial. So the way you become strong is you do things that are beneficial to you. That's how you become strong. Number one thing, you do those things that are beneficial to you. Number two, you ask Allah's help. Because if you're going to do, usually beneficial things are easy or difficult? Difficult. So you need Allah's help. And the third thing, لا تعجز, don't give up. Meaning life is going to get difficult. If you try to be a great person, your life is going to immediately become difficult. And when your life gets difficult, it's easy to give up. So don't give up. And then fourth, because you've embarked on the path of greatness, don't ever let shaitan tell you that maybe if I didn't do this, life would have been better. Only if I did that program instead of this program. Only if I moved to this city instead of that city. Right? Okay. But does everyone get shock and awe? Could be many things. The next one is a penetrative question. That's also a hook. What's a penetrative question? Like, give me a question that you asked that, like, see people get like, oh my God, I never thought about that. Yes? Very good. Good example.
What is our responsibility towards brother?
There you go. If the Prophet is telling every single person in some capacity is a shepherd, right? وَمَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَائِعَتِهِ, and they're going to be answerable over their flock. What are you a shepherd of? Very simple, right? What's your flock? Yes. Anecdote, that's our next one. Yes, anecdotes. Correct. Right? Any other penetrative questions you can ask? Think about a penetrative, like you ask this question and it was like, oh, I'm really interested in knowing the answer to this thing. So for the rest of the khutbah, you're answering that. So you turn your thesis into a question and ask that question. And then the rest of the khutbah, you answer that question. Very good. What are the ways that you can destroy your soul or your relationships? Very good. How are you preparing for Ramadan? And if you make it more, see, you can now combine it. You can combine these two. So let's say a shock and let's say Ramadan's coming up. Actually, this was what I was going to tell you to do. I was going to tell you guys all to do for each one of them, put you into groups, and then the topic is Ramadan, right? But since you brought it up, actually I don't want to do that because I don't want to give you guys hints. So we'll just move on. Okay? The next one is anecdotes. Anecdotes are stories or things that have happened. So you basically tell a story. It's like, you know what happened? Once I was doing this, and this is what I saw. Can you believe it? Or there was, or you tell a story about some other scholar who's mentioned a story, or some other thing. It's a story. You loop people into your understanding through a story. You say, for example, this is a true story. Mental health is a serious issue on campuses amongst Muslims. There was a Muslim chaplain at the University of Nottingham in the UK. He got a call about someone who had suicidal ideations, right? And he was helping this sister out. And then another person called and they had faith issues. They were going to leave Islam and they wanted some questions answered. And what this chaplain realized and recognized is that this is actually a curative model. It's not a preventative model. We should prevent this from happening. And so he spent the next few years developing an entire course that university students across the English-speaking world and any university can take these courses that will save people's iman and give them purpose of life so they don't commit suicide. And the topic of my khutbah is everyone should leave a legacy behind. That was the legacy of that man. He saved hundreds of people's iman and hundreds of people's lives. What is your legacy? You can combine them, right? Okay. Another very important hook. So these are all easy. Shock and awe, it comes to your mind. Penetrative question is just a question that you're asking. An anecdote are stories, right? Anecdote is a story. The other one is basically very raw, simple thesis. State your thesis, what your topic is about. Just state that. And if you think it's relevant enough, you don't need a hook. If it's relevant enough, you don't need a hook. For example, the emergence of Ramadan. If you do the emergence of Ramadan khutbah in Sha'ban, do you need to get people's attention for the hook? It's like, let me give you context of why I'm talking about this. No, the context is that everyone knows that Ramadan's coming up in a few weeks. Right? So sometimes you can just restate your thesis. If the topic is very obvious, all you have to do is restate your thesis. Okay. Logical appeal. What's the logical appeal? Logical appeal is the argument / evidence to substantiate your topic. So this is the raw data. This is the raw data that you would use to speak about your topic. So for example, if our topic is the importance of if our topic is the importance of wealth management, why is it so important for young people to know how to manage their wealth? Right? Why is that so important? For people to be in a position that one day that they're able to be charitable, be able to donate. How do we get that? How do we initiate that? Sorry. Yes? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Go for it. No problem. So, do you understand that? What's happening is that I need to now find evidence to substantiate this. How do I find the evidence to substantiate that? I can just say that. Say, hey, it's very important for young people to be able to be charitable when they're older, and for them to do that, they have to have a system that they put in place today. That by the time they are independent, they are not receiving zakat, but giving zakat. You don't want to be in a position where you're taking people's zakat. You want to be in the position where you're giving zakat. Because as al-yadul ulya khayrum min al-yad al-sufla. That's the hadith that I'll bring in. See? I'll bring in that hadith, that the giving hand is better than the taking hand. The upper hand is better than the lower hand. You understand? Okay, so that's that. Then emotional appeal. Emotional appeal is eloquence and rhetoric shakes the heart. So this is where your khutbah is actually a wa'adh. It's a heart-penetrating reminder. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls the Quran a maw'idha, a heart-penetrating reminder. That's what a khutbah is supposed to be as well. Okay? Relevancy is exactly what it says, connecting content to lived reality. What do you think is a good conclusion? What's a memorable conclusion? Memorable conclusion has 3 components. What's one of the components? You all know it. Yes, sir. Very good. Actionable item, because that is going to make you remember the topic. What else? Association. Very good. So your whole topic, you've been talking for 20 minutes, right? 25 minutes. Is that people going to remember the 25 minutes? Are they going to remember everything you said? Do you really remember 10% of what you said? To be honest, no. So can you package all of that into one line, whether it's a verse of the Quran or a hadith of the Prophet or a piece of poetry or something? You have to repackage your khutbah into a memorable chunk. Okay? So this is a maxim of your khutbah. If your khutbah was turned, or it should be aphorism. If your khutbah was turned into a particular aphorism, which is a statement, which is powerful enough that you remember it, and powerful enough that if you double click it, there's a whole thing that opens up. Right? It's like capturing an ocean in a bottle. That's what an aphorism does. It captures an ocean in a bottle. Right? And that's the part of the khutbah you should have memorized. I'm going to end with this because you want everyone to reflect on that. And what's the third component of a memorable conclusion is the dua. Right? Is a dua. So if you're able to do this, then your khutbah becomes memorable.